Well, if I get your attention, if you would, we'll start the meeting. Those who are signing in, that's fine. It's not a big issue. So at this time, we'll call the meeting to order. After a moment of silence, Ms. Feathers will lead us into the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, going on with the agenda, there's no recognitions, and we are to the next part, which is the delegations. At this time, the delegations, first up is the Ready Math Pilot Request. Ms. Barrett.
So I have Preston with me. As you know, she is an instructional coach for the county, specializing in math in grades 3 through 5. So the rationale for this pilot is our current math proficiency rates, and I can give you
Michelle, please speak up a little bit. It's hard for me to hear.
There you go. So our current math proficiency rates, Krista's bringing those around, and you can see the targeted grades 3, 4, and 5 because the pilot would be focused on that. They're definitely lower than what we would like to see. Also, teachers have expressed a need for different or supplemental materials. They have found that GoMath doesn't align as closely with the rigor of the standards that the students need, and they want to make sure that they're ensuring success for the next grade level and to be able to demonstrate proficiency on the GSA. You can also see the 2021-22 GSA proficiency rates. That was countywide for math. And then I gave you 4 example counties of who are using Ready Math, and you can see their proficiency rates on the last GSA in math. And then there's some additional information just about who's using Ready Math in conjunction with iReady and their proficiency. Excuse me. 7 of the counties who use the Ready Math are in the top 16 in the state as far as proficiency numbers.
Okay, as a classroom teacher, which was just last year for me, I was able to become familiar with Ready Math through the Teacher Toolbox to use as a supplemental math program to provide additional work and help for my students that GoMath was not able to provide for me. So I found that the resources were high in rigor, they were applicable to the state standards, they were clearly aligned with the state assessment, and they provided success. So the structure of the lessons in Ready Math encourages students' thinking and discourse. So the conversations that they're having about math should not be quiet. It should be a conversation. And so it provides productive struggle and flexibility of strategy use for students. Ready Math also closely aligns with the mathematical habits of mind, which is what West Virginia asked us to use and keep in mind.
So there are some print materials that are available for each classroom teacher would receive the math discourse cards. These are just really question starters, and they align closely with the mathematical habits of mind, and they get students talking. So did anyone get a different answer? Does your partner strategy make sense? What is different about you and your partner strategies? One thing I like about my strategy is. And these are all just ways to get students talking about math. A lot of times they don't know how to express the strategies that they used or what worked or what didn't work. So this is just a way to scaffold that conversation. Then we got examples of different grade levels. So I have third grade. Each student would get a 2-volume student text. The lessons all follow the same format, and then there would also be teacher guides as well. I don't know if you guys are looking at these now.
We have third, fourth, and fifth here, so if you want to see them. This is fifth grade. Anyone want to see that?
There would also be access to digital copies of the student work text, and there are additional online resources that would come with the book. I can talk about it. Okay. So as far as implementation, part of the pilot is that iReady requires that they would receive, that the teachers would receive professional learning. So that would be provided. That was the majority of the cost associated with this pilot would be the professional learning because they would have to send somebody to do that work with us. The materials would be pretty much free, except for a few that would go over the line or the cutoff of 10% of our student population. And then, of course, with Krista, they would receive ongoing professional learning, coaching, support, modeling, co-teaching, all of that throughout the process.
Okay, so, participating teachers. I first put this out to my math pathway people. At the end of last year, teachers chose whether they wanted to be in the ELA pathway or the math pathway to improve their teaching. And so with Michelle's guidance, I put this out to my math pathway people. Do you want to do a Ready Math pilot? Because teachers had expressed to me that they were interested in it. So some teachers bid on that, and not quite enough to give that 10%, which is 177 student textbooks that we would get for free. So with Michelle's guidance again, I put that out to everyone. And we actually had an extra 5th grade and an extra 3rd grade classroom that's interested. So that's where the county had to step in and help us out, providing that to them, because we didn't want to say, no, sorry, you can't participate. So we have the 4th grade team that's at Kingwood Elementary School is participating, all 3 teachers. 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers at Terra Alta Elementary, and a 3rd grade teacher at West Preston. So we're going to get to see this program at 3 different schools in all 3 grade levels. So the data that will follow this, because they go hand in hand, iReady and Ready Math, we'll follow this with the iReady diagnostic, because we'll be able to compare the first semester to the second semester. And so we will also examine the general summative assessment data, the classroom teacher data, which is also obviously important, RCD, pre and post-test information, formative assessments, unit tests, everything that the teacher would be doing as assessment in their classroom. So at the end of this semester-long pilot, the county curriculum team, math instructional coaches, and participating teachers will meet to discuss the strengths and the weaknesses of the instructional materials and the plan for the future use and implementation. The whole reason that we're doing this pilot is because our county, well, our state, is up for a math adoption coming up soon. So we want to see if this works first, and that's the whole point of a pilot, is to see, with a small group, if it's effective, if it's successful, before it goes out to the entire district.
Okay, so are there any questions?
What was the cost of the person to come in, or you were saying the books were free?
The majority of the books were free. $4,500 is the cost of the training, and then the cost of the books was, I think, $1,500 for everybody.
We paid for this, did this yet? And this is related to IRA.
Yes, they're complementary. They're both standalone products. You can use either of them independently, but they are complementary. Same vocabulary, same resources, same lesson format, those things.
And of course, it makes your assessment more meaningful if your curriculum matches the assessment.
So if I understood correctly, they gave us books for free for the first 10% of our student base for just those grades that we were piloting,
Yeah.
correct? And then we had 2 additional classes that essentially that's what they're purchasing.
Sure.
The training is 4,500. Did they limit the number of teachers that can go to that? Or, I mean, like, if we had teachers that aren't in the pilot but wanted to go see
We're
the
not going to pay
training?
for that.
What's that?
We won't be, number one, we don't have the subs to make that happen.
Okay.
Out
It's
on
going to
the
go on
big
during
scale.
regular instruction time,
Yeah,
so we'll
yeah.
have to have subs.
Yeah.
Right.
So what they'll do is probably like a half day of training at first, and then a half day of planning time, collaborative planning time with each other. Now, I don't think it would be very meaningful if the teacher then didn't have the resources to use to have the training first. So it's really hand in hand. And they did require, if they were going to pilot it, they had to come to the training.
Yeah, makes sense.
And they agreed to work with me for the rest of the year. Yeah.
How many trainings is that? We know the number, like, you gotta do it 10 times or 5 times training.
We've only scheduled one.
Okay, only one
Yeah.
training, that'll be one and done.
Right.
I mean, with Irene,
Yeah.
she will follow up with you.
I'll meet with them once a week.
Yeah, on the job.
Would that training only be here for a half day?
Yeah, it's a 3-hour training.
3 hours, 4,500 credits, 3 hours. Okay. And then what metrics do you usually use for a pilot to determine whether or not you thought it was successful? Like, what metrics do you have in mind? Like, we have to see a 4% growth or a 5% growth, or what is that?
I think growth overall is what we're looking at. We're going to look at, the knowledge, teacher, the use of good instructional strategies. She can do that through observational techniques. And then we want to make, if the students are successful, if they're growing at a faster rate than students who aren't exposed to those instructional resources.
So we're going to compare the growth of the classes that are using it versus the classes that are not. Is it correct to say that the classes that participate, one of the things that the teachers I talked with that were participating in this were most excited about was a physical textbook. So our
The third and
classes,
fourth grade have physical textbooks.
what's that?
Third and fourth grade have physical textbooks.
Okay. So third and fourth have them.
Yes.
So that would be consistent across the county. So every third and fourth grade would have a textbook. Doesn't directly align per se with the iReady assessment,
They're two different
but they have,
companies.
right, but they have a textbook. The fifth grade then does
Yeah,
not
there's one
have.
teacher, there's one fifth grade teacher that's participating.
That's
Okay.
pilot, and she will have a test.
And she'll have textbooks, but the rest of the county will not.
They have it online. They have it online.
They have a digital.
Yeah.
Okay.
What grade is this cost?
3-5.
Do we have to know what it costs of one set for a kid?
No, I mean, because when you adopt, you're looking at a 6-year cost. So I'm not sure what a 1 year.
So if we spent approximately $1,500 on 2 classrooms, that's essentially 60 kids. I mean, is that correct? Like that math would work out to give you an approximate cost per student, or?
You mean of the additional textbooks?
That's the way I do it, because you want to know what the textbook set costs.
I could give you the breakdown of the,
I mean, that would come out through the adoption
Right.
process, each of those would have an advertised cost and so forth. And that would be different if you buy in bulk.
yeah, they usually give you fifties.
If it's chosen.
Right. The advantage, probably, the biggest thing if I'm here, the advantage of this, because of choosing the new math textbook next year, is actually going to be more data to look at instead of a line.
Which is what we end up doing nearly every adoption.
Now, the training we're paying for this year, we adopted this next year. Did that training come with it? Or?
So when you adopt, they have to provide professional learning as part of the adoption. And it's usually based on the number of textbooks that you buy, so it's a prorated.
Right.
You get so many hours
So many
of
hours.
professional learning based on how many textbooks you purchase.
Was there any other curriculum that we looked at to pilot?
No, this was brought about by teacher influence. I mean, they asked to have these materials because they were using them as supplemental materials through the teacher toolbox anyway. So they were making copies and it was a lot. So they were interested in it and I talked with Michelle and
Aligned with the benchmark assessment, of course.
That was one of the pieces,
Complementary.
right, that was one of the pieces of feedback, was that they just said like, this will align directly with what's being used
Yes.
with the
Yes.
iReady system as far as things go.
right.
But, and then the last thing, I think in your presentation, you said that allows for, maybe fewer, but allows for multiple strategies. So if I teach or if my son asks for help with math, and I teach my son the math that I learned, and that is a different strategy for getting to the solution than what the teacher goes over. The student has the capability of getting the same score as any other student using the same strategy that the teacher originally taught.
Well, a teacher should be always using multiple strategies and accepting multiple strategies. Now, if they were asking a particular question using, let's say, please demonstrate the repeated addition sentence that matches this multiplication sentence, then yes, they need to demonstrate that particular strategy for multiplication. But if it's just, solve this addition problem, any strategy is accepted.
The standard actually calls for flexible use of strategies. So the standards actually require that multiple ways of getting to the problem are shared, discussed, and accepted.
Yeah, I just didn't know, I'd love to see it, I don't know how a computer, I know that we're using a computer for a lot of our assessments, but it's seeing the strategy, like, to me, there's a lot of different ways that you can do strategy with math.
Oh,
I don't know how that flows through technology, that's what you're
Well,
saying.
so what
ultimately, it's
the
accepted.
student would work the problem on paper and then give them the correct answer. So as long as the answer is correct, it doesn't matter how the kid got there,
Sure.
as long as they were doing it.
Yes.
Okay.
Evidence. Whatever strategy they chose to use is fine, because they're just leading the correct answer.
Generally, what we're saying, assessment doesn't ask them to show strategy, they can work it out on paper.
Well, it may say which strategy is demonstrated here,
Okay.
like she said, okay, this is repeated addition. So it may do something like that, but it's not going to ask, for them to demonstrate.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Martinez, I believe if we could, to slide down where this is talked at in the agenda.
It's item D, the curriculum instruction.
To go to there so we can do it at the same time. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion for the board to approve the requested pilot by 6th Street teachers to utilize Ready Math curriculum for the remainder of the 22-23 school year.
I'll make that motion. Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Taylor. Are there any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Ready to vote? No, it's not. Now it is. Motion passes 5-0.
Ladies, thank you for presenting, and also it shows listening to the teachers.
What's that?
I said also, listen to the teachers. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, put it in the chairs. I can bring them back to you if they want to check them out after.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda will be, I'll let them come out of the way, you guys will start coming up. Will be the student support service team, support service team presentation, Mrs. Schaefer and Stafford.
Come on. Well, I know we're not moving in. I'm
Don't worry.
It's nice to be on the real shoes, two of them. Okay, good evening. I would like to provide an opportunity for our student support services team to introduce themselves and tell you what their position is and where they work, because we have a number of people who have different positions. We have communities and schools people, we have a student support specialist, we have McKinney-Vento people, we have, who am I missing, social workers. We have a lot of different people represented here this evening. So I'm going to give them an opportunity to find their voices and tell us who they are, where they work, and what their title is. Where do you guys know? You want to go first?
So I am Maureen Durst, and I'm a school counselor at Terrata and Aurora.
I'm Lincoln Barger. I'm the counselor at Central Preston.
I'm Andrea Stanley. I'm the school social worker at Kenwood Elementary and Central Preston.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ashley Hovatter. I am also with Communities and Schools at Preston High School.
I'm Rochelle Lehman. I'm under the McKinney-Vento grant at the high school.
I'm Rebecca Fussell. I work at West Preston for Community Schools, and I'm a student success liaison. Mary Martin, Terrata East Preston. I'm with Communities and Schools, and I'm a site coordinator. Joni Everett, I'm at Preston School with Communities and Schools.
Michael Sheets, South Preston Community and Schools.
Kathy Hellman, I'm the school social worker at Terrata East Preston and
Cameron Haynes, counselor at here Roseburg and Bellsville.
Stormy Johnson, student support specialist, Roseburg and Bellsville.
Shane Murray, community schools at Preston.
So you heard two different titles for our communities and schools. They're both. Communities and schools call them site coordinators. Their official title with Preston County Schools is student success liaison. It's the same thing. They all do the same thing. Just in case that was confusing. So not with us this evening. We have two school counselors who are on maternity leave. Lauren Petticord, who is the school counselor at Preston, and Holly Hartzell, who's the school counselor at West. Also not able to be with us this evening. Actually, a lot of counselors were not able to be here this evening. We have Patrick McLaughlin, who is a counselor at West, Crystal Pell, who's a counselor at Kingwood, Kim Matheny, Jane Lane, Shelley Piles, and Vicki Parks, who are school counselors at Preston High. Olivia Olivito, sorry, I can't read my own writing. Olivia Olivito, who is the school counselor at Brewston, and Jacqueline Martin, who's the school counselor at South Preston. So when we sat down together to talk about what we wanted to talk to you guys about, what we do as a group, what we do for our kids and for our families, we had a great deal of discussion around what our students live with on a daily basis. That there's a lot of trauma that occurs in homes around the country, not just in Preston County, West Virginia, but across the United States. There's a lot of trauma that happens in homes. So we work with students who come to us on any given day with handle with care situations. We officially work with handle with care situations, which means that something happened in their home the evening before that required some kind of emergency services, whether that was an ambulance, whether it was police, whether it was any kind of emergency services that came to their house. It could be resulting from violence in the home. It could be resulting in an emergency situation with someone's health, like a parent that had a heart attack or something like that. It could have been something like that. It could have been something that involved drugs or alcohol. And so if one of those things happen, the emergency services team tells a specific person. That specific person gets a hold of me, and I communicate that with the principal and then our student support team so that they can communicate it to the teachers also. So that they know to handle that student with care the next day. Because we all know that when something happens, you know, how do we feel when something happens at home? When we walk into work the next morning, our mind's not always on what you're doing then. So we do that in an official way through that system, but we also do it when we know things are going on in the home, and that's kind of a lot of the students that we work with are having those kinds of situations happen in their home. So we are available to those students to bridge that gap between some event that is often horrific and being able to focus on their schoolwork and learn something that day, which is our goal. We all agreed that in order to accurately present what we do, we needed to present a small piece of the enormous amount of research about trauma and how it affects students. So Ashley Hovatter is going to present to you, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about trauma.
Thank you everyone for having me today. So like Laura said, I'm here to talk about childhood trauma and what is trauma. And trauma is such a complex topic that I could spend the entire board meeting honestly talking to you all about trauma. Trauma, it's in many different ways. It can be one event and multiple events. Trauma as well can be seen in infants from 0 to 3 and all the way up. What I want to focus on today, though, however, is trauma within our children that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and how that trauma, what we're seeing in education, not just in Preston County, but in education as a whole, what that trauma and how that is affecting our students today. There's a National Research Board Association did research on the adverse childhood experience, and if you do not know what that is, because once again, I can spend all board time speaking about that. They found that childhood trauma is among one of the most prevalent and significant psychosocial factors affecting education today. And also the American Psychological Association, they found within their research that trauma can lead to multiple of things. Trauma can lead to increase in absences in our students, which is something communities and schools at the high school is trying to really focus in on. Trauma can lead to the child's abilities to read, honestly. It can increase dropout rates, expulsions, suspensions. Students that have dealt with trauma, and like I said, these students could experience trauma at an infant age, and that trauma has now changed their brain development, and you start to see that over time and time as they grow older and get into the high school and into the adult world, what this trauma really has affected, how it has affected that individual, and how it has affected that student. You start to see difficulties in an individual and students regulating their emotions, not being able to understand emotions, their behaviors as well. You have a difficult time seeing these students and their behaviors and them not understanding why they're acting a certain way or why they get mad so easy or a multitude of things. That is all leading to trauma. There's so much research that has been presented. I included somewhere in that little handout some information as well on some research that I would encourage you all to read. It's lengthy because it is research. And this research on what we're looking at trauma and how that is affecting our children, it started about in the 1990s, but since then, the statistics and those research is startling. And it's heartbreaking truly on how it's making such a huge impact with our students as well. So what role can we do? How can we help? That's where all these amazing people, what we do on a day-to-day basis, because we do have support in our elementary schools in some way. So we're able to work with students with trauma, and trauma is not a one-size-fits-all. Everyone can experience trauma. It's not just our students that come from those low socioeconomic status. It's students from everywhere. And that's what we work with on a day-to-day basis. These students that are in elementary school, they have that support. Then they move up to the middle school where they also are receiving that support. And then they come up to the high school where they're continuing to receive that support, where we understand trauma, where we're helping them cope with social skills, cope with their reading abilities. Because there's a study also done at the Texas Education Agency where they're looking at how it's not just what we need to focus on is academics. We also need to focus on a child's mental and emotional state to be able to work with them academically. Those three things kind of create the perfect sequence, the perfect three, to be able to see increase in their reading and their math scores and across the board as well. So how can we help and what can we do? That's where board members, that's where our educators, that's where our administrators, our support staff, that's where we all come together to want to educate ourselves on trauma. Because as I started at the beginning, we don't know what trauma is. We do not read that research that is there. We won't understand how we can help these kids. So educating ourselves on trauma and trauma-informed schools as well to be able to ultimately support our students, because that's what we all do. What kind of questions do you guys have for me? That sums it up.
Do we have a handle of care every day, like a tweet out to teachers?
I'm at the high school. There is, Mr. Shane and I are at the high school, and there is, I'd say, day-to-day basis, we have a handle of care of some
So the
capacity.
teachers know at the beginning of the day, this person had a rough day last night. And we're tweeting that to the teachers.
Yeah, come on. I'm actually going to come over and let you come back, and then we'll take questions. So to answer your question about do we have a handle with care every day? Absolutely we do, but we don't always know about it. So
Okay, the ones you do know about.
the ones we do know about,
So
we
that
get
teacher-
sent out. They meet before school. If I get them before school starts, that principal, and I mean, it's my responsibility to get them to the principal and the nurses and the school support staff, and then they get them to the teacher. So yes, but we don't always know. Sometimes there's a breakdown in there. And then, I mean, an official one, where, someone was removed from the home, either in a police car or an ambulance or something like that, we get them regularly. Not as often as we should, given what we know about the statistics in our county. But, yes. Okay, so, in education, we have a saying that says you have to Maslow before you can bloom. The phrase Maslow before bloom essentially means that in order for a person to effectively participate in the educational process, with thinking and questioning and reasoning, that a person must first have their basic needs met. So that's another avenue, that's another aspect of what these people, and they are a wonderful group of people, she's exactly right. That's another place that they shine, is meeting our students' basic needs. We have to be able to know that we have food and clothing and shelter before we can worry about whether we have safety, and then before we worry about whether we have love and belonging, and it goes up the hierarchy that Maslow, who was a researcher, said that we have to have. So we find students a lot of the students that we deal with are struggling with those aspects. They're struggling with not having adequate housing or adequate food and those kinds of things. Some of the things that you will find in your packet, the initial one that I gave you at the beginning, are statistics about how much we've done already this year. I couldn't have picked a worse board meeting for us to come to, because all of these lovely people are deep in the trenches of handing out holiday food boxes and presents right now. Hundreds of those. So, but they came nonetheless. I'm very appreciative that they did that. But those are the things that we are doing. So the very beginning of your packet has all of those colored things. I've made them in color because you can't see them if they're not, like you don't know what they mean. And so all of those things are communities and schools information. Those graphs and all of that are strictly from our communities and schools from last year, and a couple of them have some information about this year already. So you can see a lot of the things that we have provided for kids. Our mission in Student Support Services is to support students and families by removing barriers that prevent students from achieving academic and social success. We want our students to become educated and successful human beings who are contributors to our society. We have very real discussions with our students. We encourage them. We work with them on schoolwork. We educate them. We strive to keep the main thing the main thing. And the main thing is learning. We are a school first and foremost, but if they can't access learning because their stomachs are empty and they don't have clothes to wear at school, or they don't have clean clothes to wear at school, then that's where we come in to remove those barriers so that they can access their opportunities to learn. Many teachers understand that students don't care how much you know until they know how much you care, and it's the same for us. We have to earn a voice with our students. We have to build relationships with our students and work to make sure that when we have a conversation with them, they're hearing what we're saying, and we've earned the right to talk to them about those things. Some of our students have very difficult lives, and they have problems with trust, as you can well imagine. So those are things that we work to break down those barriers so that we can help them so that they can access their education. So we wanted to provide you guys with all the materials. There are some success stories in there. There are some information. Whatever everybody gave me, I put in your packet. So that you would know what kinds of things we're doing and what kind of successes that we've had, the kind of things that make us get up and come to work every day. But I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask them questions about anything that you want to know about what we do, what we need, how we're doing it, anything that you'd like to know. Anybody have any questions?
Are parents consulted in any way about participation?
Yes.
For instance, I know my child has been asked how they feel about COVID, and there is absolutely no reason why my third grade child should ever be asked about COVID. It does not affect his life in any way, shape, or form. So, how is that determined?
Well, respectfully, I'd have to disagree that it did affect his life, because there were things that happened in his world that changed drastically because of COVID. He couldn't go to school, or there were things. But
I'm sorry, it didn't affect in any way that he could have there was nothing he could do in those things. So, it was not having information and having the ability to do something with information. So I'm sorry, you're correct. There are things that got affected. He had to wear a mask when he went certain places.
Right.
He wasn't able to come to school for a year, things like that. But I'm saying, so how was that?
So I would say that he was probably, I don't know who asked your student that, but I'm going to say that if it was one of these guys, it was probably just to make sure that he was dealing with it emotionally. Does it make me more afraid? Am I more afraid to go somewhere? Or am I concerned about something? Did I have a family member that was very sick and I was worried about them and I'm having trouble processing that? Because a lot of our kids don't have those skills. And I am trying to say this as respectfully as possible. Most of our students don't have you to help them talk through that.
Right.
So,
but in that case, I guess it created something that my son now had to ask, it created concern that he did not have any previous need.
They didn't care about before.
If there's having information that I do nothing about is more frustrating than not having the information for me, or at least so. And I'm thinking if I were so that's what I'm asking is how are parents given the opportunity? I don't know how you normally get notified. If you get a report from EMS and 911, or if the parents tell you, if I were to be in a car accident, I would want that affecting my kid's day at school, right? There'd be no reason for that to affect their day at school. They're going to find out when they get home and they have an appropriate family member that can support, you know, kind of, so I'm saying, how does that get relayed?
Right. So if something happens during the school day, unless a parent tells us, we don't have, that would not affect your son's school day. However, if you were in a car accident the night before, and then he came to school the next day, you know, he might be asked, you okay? Is there, you know, is everything good? You know, is there something you need? And it can be as simple as that. And some kids want that. Some kids want to be able to step out and have a moment. Some kids don't. Am I saying that accurately? Some kids will say, "No, I'm good," and they don't want to deal with it in school. They want to go about their normal day because that's how they handle things. But some kids do very much want to talk about it and get some.
But do we call and ask, you know, if the father was, do we call and ask the mother before we address with the kids? Like, if the parents had not, I mean, it's not uncommon for me to be at work before my kids are up.
Right.
Right, so like, they would, you know, wouldn't know anything other than my wife just said, we'll deal with this tonight instead of 10 minutes before we get on the bus or 30, you know, the rush morning.
So if it's a handle with care, tell me if I'm wrong about how this happened, because I have a different perspective. Like I have the perspective from the county office. So tell me if I'm correct about this. In the schools, when you guys do handle with care, you kind of just check to make sure things are going well for the kid. Like you might not even talk to the kid. You might talk to the teacher and say, are there, you know, what kind of, is everything okay? If he needs to talk to somebody. So we don't always necessarily address it with the kid.
Handle it with care.
Right.
So we need to see it, just looking at that student in the hall, just seeing them interacting with their friends. Okay, they're good. We may not have that conversation with them. If we need to, we will. We're handling that child with care for that day, that week, that month, whatever that student needs from us.
Is your question about permission to talk to us first, or is your question about after we talk to them, then we talk to you?
In general, I understand that we have many children in our system that do not have appropriate support at home. But again, in the instance of the way that my children were addressed, and again, I'm just using this as an example. If I had a major issue, I'd have knocked on somebody's door. But just as an example, I saw absolutely no reason for my kids to be spoken to about COVID. They then had questions about, again, things that just don't affect their life. I mean, like, this massive thing. Right? We are probably the most blessed family in this entire country as far as COVID went, to be completely honest. So we are an anomaly. But I'm just using that as an example of something. So that's all I was asking, was just how that generally is processed.
We have, with communities and schools, we have a permission form also that we have to get signed by the parents that's giving us permission to do our jobs as well. So that's also.
That's done over a long-term thing, or every parent signs one of those at the end of the school year? So for a long-term solution, other than just like a day of, there is a permission slip. Okay.
Yes. To actually work with that student on a consistent basis, there's a permission slip.
The counselors have that in the handbook that we can talk to all students. Right. And that the parents sign off on that handbook every single year. So
Okay.
that's where we can step in without their permission beforehand, because you already gave us permission.
And then last year, we had what was called an opt-out form in community schools. So if the parent didn't sign it saying they didn't want the child to participate with us, then it was just an automatic they could. But then community schools looked at that and thought, this might not be a good idea, so then they started this year with the actual consent form. So we have that.
Last year, the opt-out was the inverse of the opt-in this year.
Right.
For, again, long-term case management, something. Okay.
I've never gotten an investigator that is involved. Using a correct as an example. This is usually domestic violence where the kid witnesses it. A medical emergency, I had a medical emergency in my home 3 weeks ago. No one was notified because my kid went home in his house. So it's, the kids have actually witnessed it for us to handle with care.
I see your chart that says percentage of student improvement academics. And we have 28% net goal, 44% progress, 22% goal not met. A no data in a school closure, which is 0%, so it's irrelevant. how is this measured? What is that based on? GPA increase, full letter increase, just the student feedback of here was my goal, is that your goal?
So each school has a specific goal that they have to look at each year, and that's through the strategic plan of that school. So like last year, everyone in community schools was attendance, so that was our goal. So what we were looking at was the attendance rate for those specific children. And in community schools, they expect at least 2% increase in attendance for their goal to be met.
And that 2% is on your long-term cases, on every student in the system?
That is on our case-managed specific students.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the case of this school year, only kids that parents signed a consent form, that data is taken into account for this chart.
I don't know what chart you're looking at,
That
but
been last year's.
both things are.
That is last year's. That's last year's.
Both things are looked at because we work on, different tiers. So we also do school-wide incentives and programs to increase attendance, and then we do specific case management too.
So there are 3 tiers. Tier 1 is every student in the building. And to some degree, all of the communities and schools, and actually everybody up here, deals with things that are for the entire school. They may be incentive programs, they may be PBIS, positive behavior intervention systems, they may be something like that. And then tier 2, that's for all students. Tier 2 is the students who aren't really working, that total thing for everybody is not really working for them. They need a little bit more support. And then tier 3 is the ones who really desperately need the support. They're the case managed students. They're the ones that they're working very specifically to try and increase their grades. And I think that goes by grade through GPA. I think that specific, the academic one, I think goes by GPA. Because we all do, in their data that they collect, which these poor people who are in CIS collect, so look at all of them smiling. They're like, yes, we do a lot of data. But part of what they collect is what their grades were before, so that they know where they need to head, what they need to work with. So if the kid didn't have any, like if the kid passed everything, they probably are not a good fit for that case manager thing. We may need to drop them back to the tier 2 stuff, where we check in with them, we're supporting them, but we're not necessarily meeting with them on a regular basis and that kind of thing.
What is a regular basis?
It depends. It just depends on the student. Each student has their own case plan, depending on their needs.
So do we currently have any limits on the amount of time taken out of instruction time for a child to be participating in a session with?
So my direction to them has always been, barring an emergency, that student is in crisis. So barring that situation where that student cannot access their education at that moment, barring that situation, they are not to take them out of core classes. They're to talk to the teacher about when an appropriate time is for them to step out. Because some students will finish their work and have a little bit of time that they can come and check in with them and talk to them. And I know all of them are pretty good at checking in with teachers and making sure that we are working in conjunction with them and not against. We don't want to work against them, we want to work for them. We want to remove the barriers to the teachers being able to teach that student.
So the teachers have discretion of when they allow the student to leave?
Yes.
So it's at teacher discretion?
Yes.
Whether or not they like the student?
And then with our younger kids, sometimes with attendance, you're not going to go to a first grader and be like, you have 10 absences, so you may be checking in. So you don't have to specifically always check in with the child about it. You can also check in with the teacher, and that's considered a check-in as well. So you're not taking those children out, because if it's a younger kid, they're not going to know why, the absences. Or you may call the parent, and that's considered a check-in. So you don't always have to remove that child to complete the check-in.
Any other questions?
Another question. Yeah, I have 2 questions.
that with communities and schools, in Preston County schools, that less students will need the help that these services provide? That's my first question.
Can you say that one more time?
Do you believe that with CIS and in Preston County schools that less students will need the help that these services provide?
Like students receive, will they need less over a period of time?
Yeah.
Oh.
Like the groups that you're working with,
So
do you see?
I think your question is, we get new students all the time, and new families coming in, so that's really not going to, like, we're not going to be non-existent over time. We're going to still be needed because we still get more students every single year, different families moving in and out, people
Was that your question?
I think he's asking, if over time, do they step out?
We bring
You're talking about individuals.
And all that, gaining coping skills and.
Right.
Mr. Shaker, community schools, there are certain cap limits in terms of how many student enrollment they can take on.
Yes, there are. So their first year is 20 students. So we have 2 people that have 20 to 25. It says 20 and 25 in different places. So somewhere between 20, we try to keep it at 20. So Ashley and Mike have only 20 to 25 students this year. Raise your hand if you were here last year. Okay, those 4 have, is it 10%? 10%, although
5% of your population is over 1,000.
there you go. So Shane's at the high school, so if he had 120 kids, I mean, that would not be good. Can you do it, Shane?
60s.
Yeah, exactly. So
And that's not right at the very beginning of the school year, so they give us a rubric of you need to have this many by this time of the school year, this many by this time of the school year, so you're not trying to do 60 plans at once for these children, so that they give us a basis of like our goal setting for our caseloads.
Okay, Mr. Savage, second.
It also goes with the reevaluation process too, so if you're not needing the same student, they can progress on.
But, and I'm sorry, I will let him go back to this question, but you're saying you're only allowed up to 20, so on day, like, most of your schools may have one of you, right? So on day 1, 25 kids lose a parent. What do we do with the 5 that goes over to 25, or we go to 20 or 25?
we'll go ahead and start with that.
But they're not an official case. So my question is, what's the difference between the ones that are a caseload and the ones that are not?
As a school counselor, that'd be under me for help.
And I think honestly what your question is, coming from the classroom, we don't always have to have a counselor to tell us that's happening. Because a lot of times the teachers, they get a hold of the counselor. If God forbid we have 25 people who lose a parent, those 25 kids will be taken care of that day by somebody.
Yes.
It may not be somebody in blue, but it's going to be, somebody's going to make sure that kid's taken care of.
Absolutely, and we also, like, if God forbid, if something like that happened, we go to each other's schools. Like, they get a hold of me and say, I'm having this situation, and then we figure out who's available to be able to go.
And we've done that with student deaths or different.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, Mr. Savage.
Yes, I have another question. This is really for the counselors, because they should be the one to know this. Do you know the percentage of how many foster children use these services?
So use what services?
The CIS services? Any service that you guys provide?
That's CIS question. I don't know what your data is.
We do not have an exact figure of foster children. I mean, I know how many foster kids we have in the building. Yes.
Foster children also, do they qualify directly from McKinney Mentor Services?
No, they do not. So foster children, they used to. Foster children, yes, foster children used to qualify for McKinney-Vento, which is our homeless grant. So in order to be identified as a homeless student, you have to be doubled up with another family because of financial reasons, like have lost your home because of financial reasons. It can be inadequate housing, what am I missing? Shelter, it could be inadequate shelter. What else am I missing, ladies? I feel like I'm missing something. Yeah, living in a car. I mean, sofa surfing, you know, any of the things that you think of when you think of homeless, plus they could be living with another family. So like, if Rochelle's family suddenly lost their home for financial reasons and moved in with my family are not considered McKinney-Vento identified, but her family is. Does that make sense? And once you're identified for the year, you're identified for the year. So our new ones are, our numbers right now represent brand new ones because we started with a clean slate at the beginning of this year. And to answer your question about foster kids, they used to be identified as McKinney-Vento, but they're not now because the federal government said, these two organizations give these kids the same exact services and goods. So there's specific, there are specific things that we provide, and so they felt like it was double dipping to do that. Now I'm going to tell you that we all deal with foster kids, and we all make sure that they're getting everything that we can provide for them. It just doesn't come from the specific McKinney-Vento.
Okay, can I ask another question? So, this whole student services and CIS thing, they obviously deal with very serious situations, right? So my question is, how often do they have to report certain instances to authorities?
So, we're all mandated reporters, so obviously if there's a situation that we need to report, that's the goal we have to make that report, so our mandated reporters.
You're asking how often though?
Like how often do we reports?
It just depends. So over the last 3 months, I've had reported to me over 75 times that we made a report to CPS.
Thank you.
Yeah, free lunch and breakfast in the schools, we have on that.
They're all on it, right?
Are we still doing that food on Fridays?
Yes. So the free and reduced lunch is not my lane. I'm trying to stay in my lane, Jeff. I'm trying, Jeff, I have enough lanes. I'm trying to stay in mine too. So free and reduced lunch is not mine, so I'm not quite sure, but I do believe it's everyone. But yes, the Friday backpack food is my lane. And we work with Food for Preston, and we get food for students.
Yeah. It's a huge for some.
It's very huge for some students. It's actually heartbreaking.
Any other
They
questions?
can all tell you.
Okay.
Okay, so this is for Mr. Murray, because I'm looking at your thing right here. I have some stuff written down. I see that you have about 85 students, and that you said we should be looking to expand our reach of student support in this county, in particular where poverty and drug use run rampant. What percentage of kids you have would you say are in poverty and have parents that use drugs?
Top of my head, over half for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe closer to 3/4, more than likely, if I had to estimate.
And if I learn about these families and their life and what they're going through by simple conversations with them. These kids don't open up and share their family history. Some do, some don't. So just us building that rapport with those kids and having these conversations with them. And we start by just saying hello to them in the halls. That's how conversation starts, just by saying hi. And over time, we build that trust with that student to where we can learn, really dive down into the trauma that they've experienced and what they're going through or have gone through or will go through.
For which the whole purpose is for us to be able to remove some of those boundaries that they have to learning. Because it's like Mr. Murray's thing says, like if they don't know that they have a place to live, or they don't know what they're going to eat, or they don't know that their clothes are clean, there's no way that they have the picture of what education can do for them.
Until you help them out of that poverty situation, it is a continuing situation.
Exactly. So starting in January, we're all going to get together because there's only a couple of us that have experienced the Ruby Payne framework for understanding poverty. So I'm going to educate them, the younger ones. We're going to read that book together and talk about it because I think that, especially in our county, that's a situation we need to be focused on.
Years ago, we used to be required to do home visits.
We do a lot of home visits.
And not just them, as teachers.
Yes.
And probably the greatest lesson was those home visits. Because a lot of the people go on as teachers and professionals, you didn't come from that background. So it's hard for you to actually imagine. When you ask a kid if they've got running water, they tell you the answer is yes. They do have running water. It's a garden hose from the top of the hill that comes down to their own. That's what's hard for people to understand when you didn't grow up that way. And Mr. Murray, and what I've read real briefly, your point's very valid. When you come from families that you don't experience that, it's hard for our teachers to know, and it's hard for the outside people to know, and you didn't grow up that way. So I thank you for doing that. Anything else?
My last question was just what training and resources, how much training is spent on understanding how to help, but not engage.
Okay.
Children will take and latch onto an excuse very quickly. And so I mean, is there a major emphasis? To me, the biggest failure in our entire country and society is perpetuating a lifestyle that the parents previously needed somebody else to take care of everything, and a second generation being passed down to failure at the highest level. So,
I'll speak a little bit about it. So part of what we do is not just working with the student, it's working with the family member, because the student can't really do much if they don't have water in their home or electric in their home. So what we have to do at that point is try to build a rapport with the family, and that can take some time. But you have to try to break down the barrier with them as well, so that you can find out what it is that they need, and not do it for them, but help them find those resources, give them that information, and help them make those phone calls, do what they need to do to get those things back in place. So it's not about doing, it's about teaching them how to do it. Because their parents probably didn't know how to do it, so they didn't know how to do it, and their kids aren't going to know how to do it either. So we've got to stop it somewhere. So it's about engaging the entire family and not just the student.
So how much emphasis do we place on that this year?
A lot.
I started our meeting in the beginning of the school year telling them we're doing things differently. Like we have been enablers, and we're not going to do that anymore because we're not really helping them if we don't put the tools in their hands. We're nobody's, savior. We have to teach them how to help themselves. If that means us going to their homes and sitting down with them and saying, okay, so we need a budget because we are not paying your electric bill or whatever it is, on and on and on. Will we help you to make sure that you have electric once? Yes, we will. But we're not going to keep doing it because, and we're blessed to have grants and community members who are willing to help with that kind of stuff. So we get them involved. This lady right here is like the queen of resources. She is. And you are. And so I'll walk in and see her on the phone with a family going, okay, so here's 3 numbers that you can call. You need to call them. So, where before we would say, well, I'll call somebody and see if I can connect you. So we just decided this year we're an educational agency. Our goal is to educate. We educate the student, we educate the parents too.
Thank you all.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate you coming out and giving us your time. What you need. Okay, well, they're coming and going out. Mr. Cummings, you'll be next with fellow bills.
Start getting ready.
Good luck out there.
You guys might just be down here. I can do that. I'm grabbing one.
And I'm not allowed to open with my opening joke.
I'll be riding Mary Ann up in the morning.
Nothing new.
All right, let's get you two. One up here, Chrissy and Roberta. And come on, Sloan. Come on down here. We have quite a few here that are double for those schools. And, but we'll focus on Fellows,ville now and Roseburg after.
Want to separate them and you want to do the same time?
We can do it at the same time, Bruce, if that's okay. That'd be fine.
Just tell us when to speak.
Huh? Okay. Why are you guys all standing here? You can sit down. I'm standing. No, I'm just. We had some that want to be here tonight, but sickness has hit some of our teachers. And it's too bad that they couldn't be good teachers. That's what we go there. You go. It's nice to have you here in Roseburg. And some of you got to see the building. Some of you have never seen it before. It's a beautiful facility. And we're glad that you're here. I think everybody has a copy on the forms that were sent out. You should have them on your computers. And so we're going to follow along with that. And I wanted to bring everyone here to you because they're more involved in some of the areas that I am, and they can speak to certain areas that I can speak to, but not with the passion that they may. So number one on your paper, we just want to kind of use that as a format to move through this. Under Fellows,ville, the first one is what type of academic or general school improvement needs exist at your school. And the first thing that our minds always go to is our academics. And even though Fellows,ville seems to always rank in the top of the county, and I have here the history of the last several years from the state, and I think Fellows,ville is one of the only schools in the county that met its goal in both math and ELA. So we're very proud of that. And so, but there's always room for growth. And so ELA has become one of our goals this year to increase students' reading ability. Our staff at Fellows,ville works in a collaborative way. We're very proud of the atmosphere that we have there. We're very proud of the unity that we have there. I've been there going on 8.5 years, with 1 year interrupted that I was at Brewston. But we've developed an atmosphere there that is just a wonderful atmosphere. And I think that one of our greatest successes is because of the size of the school and the size of the classrooms, that we're able to really work with our children. But we are data-based, and we work off of our data, and we use the iReady data and the Zoom data to get our results, and then we formulate through our PLCs on what we need to do to address each student. That's the first part of that. And the second part, some school improvements due to the enrollment, they want to have an additional water station added into the school. And because of COVID, we don't drink from the water fountain, the way that you did. You don't know what it is to be a kid unless you drank water from the water hose. And Bruce was talking about the water hose coming down the hill. But that's all we ever got when we was kids out playing, was to drink from the water hose, because Mom wouldn't let us in the house. But they would like to have another water station. And the gutters around the building are grown little trees, and so that needs to be addressed as well. And I don't know where we're putting it, but we need some gravel out there. And someone put the third grade needs a new projector. So that would be Jennifer's, and Jennifer's not here. So that's number one. And I'm going to let Preston kind of bounce off here. Mary, you want to get two?
Just to add a little bit to what he said on number one, though, where we said we were lacking in the ELA part, we are, as a staff, we applied for the after-school program as teachers, and so our staff is now in charge of our after-school program. So this is another way we are trying to meet this ELA. Mr. Cummings also mentioned that we usually rank in at least the top 5 of the county, but we don't, as teachers at our school, we don't look at that. I know the principals do, you have the data meetings and all of those, but we look at where we were last year. Okay, let's improve that. That's our goal. We're not we look at the data of other schools. That's, you have to. But as the teachers, they're looking at what how they performed and how they can improve that to get those scores, keep it up. Because we are from a very poverty-stricken area, and once our children leave us, we might go out when the middle school bus pulls in, and we'll be greeting them off their buses as they're getting on transferring buses, because we want to make sure they're okay. And it's such it's hard when they are first starting middle school, and it's a hard situation and change for them, and you're meeting them, and I didn't have a good day today. You only have those split seconds to say, I'm sorry you didn't have a good day today, and I bet tomorrow's going to be better. You're going to meet someone, you're going to make new friends, things like that. So when he says relationships, we really try to keep those relationships. And that goes along with how do we view the academic progress that our children are making. We want to see progress. We know a learning disability usually in one of our children before they're ever tested. And so, because we have teachers that taught in the special education field for many years, we take their guidance, their knowledge of what they've used before, pull in things, and start to work with that child to do what we need to do. And we're small enough that we can do that. We can reach a lot of our children if they are willing to be reached. Sometimes you've got children with barriers, but that's got to be like your staff. That's got to be reached before you can make the progress in learning. And when we're saying showing growth, and they're using the iReady program, we are also using other ways of monitoring our progress and growth. We recently had a lot of training in guided reading. It was after guided reading, what do you do, and things like that. And so they gave us more benchmarks, I guess you want to call them, or more ways to assess how the children are progressing. And if you can show them that they have learned, we had a child that came in kindergarten, for example, that's what I teach, and she did 4 letters, O, X, and the first letter of her name, and another one. And by October, when we reassessed again, it's a 4-week time period, she made 27. And so that was a real big deal to her to see it marked on a piece of paper that she took home, that, look, I knew this, but now I know this. And so I ready to some of the kids, they don't maybe not understand the progress that they're making, but we've got other ways to show progress and growth that encourages them, and daily we are trying to show them that they are doing better. So it also says here that we apply what they learn into the real world. So we use a lot of real world manipulatives in the classroom. If I'm teaching them how to count something, well, might as well just use things at home that they count. If it's cans, you know, or whatever the, coins. They might not be able to tell me yet that a nickel is worth 5 pennies, but they'll be able to count those coins, and boy, you can teach those kids that right away, that if you don't know how much a nickel's worth, then you go to the store, they're going to cheat you out of your money. Now they're going to learn fast, real fast, but they need to know how much a nickel's worth. So there's lots of things that we do for academic progress with our children in different areas. I usually have Jen beside of me, and she'll pinch me when I'm talking too much, so, or like this or something. Do we have somebody for number 3, or was that Jen?
Well, what we're going to do, is since we did 1 and 2 with Fellows-ville, we're going to do 1 and 2 with Boys.
Okay.
Is that okay that we do both schools at the same time? So this is Angie Williams, and here comes Mr. Yates. And they're going to do 1 and 2, and we'll just bounce back and forth between the 2 schools. Okay?
Hi, so as I said, I'm Angie Williams, and I teach here grades 6 through 8, math and science. The academic growth and all, one of the things that we really did is through the PLC process, we really looked to try to target what kind of things do we really need to look at in order to help our kids succeed. And we realized, and Brenda Layton also came out and helped us organize how we did our PLCs, that one of the big things was the basics. And you can't build higher if you don't have those base levels. And so we targeted some skills. And in math, especially since I teach 6-8, multiplication is the basis of everything. You don't know your multiplication, you're not going to be able to do fractions, you're not going to be able to do greatest common factor, you can't do ratio tables, you can't add, you can't do anything else. So that basis has to be in place. And we realized that some of those basic facts were needed. Multiplication in the older grade levels, maybe in the younger grade levels, that's going to look more like addition facts. It might look like counting in kindergarten, but trying to scaffold and really target in those skills while still continuing with our curriculum. So we want to support where we're at in our curriculum, but also make sure that we're filling in all those gaps and those bases. So we targeted the multiplication and whatever that looked like at lower grade levels for our first math goal. And then for English, I'll let Mr. Yates tell you.
Well, for English, again, we're looking and saying we need to make sure the foundations are in place. We tell students repeatedly, whatever field they go into, whatever part of life they look at, they must be able to communicate clearly and effectively. So, as we've gone through and set goals, the youngest students are going through, talking about 4 rules of these things must be there to have a sentence. And the K2 teacher has been able to come back and say that they all know, here are the rules. You have to have a capital letter, punctuation, a subject, and a verb. We're still working on applying that in the system. But they recognize this is what a sentence is. As they get older, then we're looking and saying, how do we put those sentences together into well-ordered paragraphs? And so by the time we get into middle school, then we're looking ahead to high school and applying the racist strategy of how do you answer an essay question, for example, whether that's on an end-of-the-year test, or whether that's simply saying, do you understand what you just read? Can you answer this question by restating it and answering and going back to the text to get evidence, demonstrating that you can communicate what you just read? And again, that's going to show up anywhere in life. Most of our students, countywide, are not going to go on necessarily to an executive desk somewhere. Every last one of them will need to be able to read and write to do curriculum effectively. So again, we're starting just with the basics and building from there, giving them the groundwork then to build on whatever direction they go later on.
So, and along with this, it's not just me in my classroom focusing on it. We're getting help all the way around. Mrs. Johnson has been working diligently with me to help support them whenever we're working on iReady. She's pulling small groups and working with my students on their targets. And then I'm also pulling them and doing checks. So it's a multi-tiered approach where we're trying with those basic tasks, but we're also trying to make sure to continue to grow on our current curriculum as well.
Okay, so one thing that Angie, I think, is saying is that one thing that we've done in most schools is we have pinpointed areas that are weak. Like Angie, she does 6th, 7th, and 8th grade math, but it's hard for her to do algebra when the kids can't multiply. And so one of the things that we've targeted in our groups, and this is at Fellows-Wills, Waltersville, because I'm directly involved in that, kids will come to my office one at a time and we practice multiplication tables. So that when they get to Angie, she doesn't have to stop teaching algebra to go back and do multiplication. And then she finds out they can't subtract. And then she finds out, and that's in the middle school area. Stormy is working with kids in sentence structure. And just like Mike was saying, sometimes they don't even know the structure of a sentence in middle school. And so they're being pulled separately to do that. So that's a collaborative thing that we're doing.
Also at Fellows-Ville, our secretary and some of the other service personnel, on their breaks, will let the children read to them. So it encourages fluency in reading, expression. So, I mean, it's school-wide, it's not just.
Okay, Stormy, she's going to go to number 3 for both schools, because Stormy works at both schools, Fellows-Ville and Waltersville.
So, one of the things that I've been doing as student support in both schools is attendance. And I've learned that these kids are really competitive at both schools. I've implemented class-wide attendance incentives just by trophies. And crazy as it seems, November was the first month we did it at Fellows-Ville. And when I went to write those perfect attendance certificates, I learned not to do them in Sharpie. Because 45 students in November, as opposed to 21 students last November, had perfect attendance. The same thing at Fellows-Ville, and they have the classroom incentives, they have the whole school incentives. It just, it's making sure that they know that you're allowed to see them, and it's not just me, it's everybody in both of these schools. I mean, when these kids come in the door, they're greeted by somebody, probably by everybody by the time they get to the classroom. That was one of the big concerns as to why we put people in all of the schools to help with the attendance thing. But in both Rollsburg and Fellows-Ville, the attendance has increased significantly, and I learned not to use Sharpie on certificates.
Very good. All right, so, and we got bikes coming in, right?
Yes. I actually hooked myself up with, it's called Free Bikes for Kids. And we're doing, for every day that the students are here, so if you've missed days, it's not like you totally miss out. You get a chance to win a bike. And at the end of the semester, we're giving away bikes. Pre-K and kindergarten, 1st and 2nd, 3rd and 4th at Fellows-Ville, the K2 class, 3-5 class, and 6-8 class here. And they're donating bikes for both semesters. So.
That's good. Very good. All right, we're going to shoot over to the LSIC presentation. And everyone here, when you work at a small school, you see half of our staff right here from Rollsburg. We have 4 teachers. And so if someone says, so who's on your LSIC committee? All the teachers. Who's on your curriculum team? All the teachers. Who's on the SAT team? All the teachers. So you're seeing half of the committee standing right here. So some of the major things that we always do in the LSIC is we always present the data. We always show the data at the schools and what we can do to improve our test scores. And Mary Ann said it so well. I, as the administrator, I'm always looking at the bottom line, trying to find out where we are, where we're going to go. And the teachers are looking at the student and seeing how they can increase that. If you notice, and we talked about this last year, some of the highest math scores coming out of the county in middle school is not from Roseburg. It is not. But what happens at Roseburg is when these students come to Angie and they are on a second and third grade level, and we have 2 split classes. Well, really we have 3 split classes at Roseburg. We have a K2, a 3-5, and then 6-7, because all those things are mixed together. We had 2 new teachers last year in those classes, 2 new teachers this year in those classes. And a lot of times kids get kind of lost in the shuffle. But Angie's been here since the first block was laid. Wait, how long, Angie, have you been here? A long time. And she will constantly take children that are 2, 3, 4 grades below level and bring them out of here where they're leaving in 8th grade and they're at 6th and 7th grade level. And a lot of times that isn't celebrated, but it must be celebrated because that's very, very difficult. And her kids are some of the most prepared kids when they leave middle school because they're brought to a level higher than a lot of other kids are. And I applaud her for that. I thank her for that. So we always are looking for ways to improve our students. Number 2, what major areas did your LSIC address this year? And again, it was data and how that we can help kids. Number 3, Cameron, come up and read number 3, and let's go through that. You have that? It doesn't matter which one you read here from, because Cameron is also the counselor at Roseburg and Fellows.
Which, I got all these days.
Here you go, right there.
Oh, okay, yeah. You got that? Yeah. These list your school business partners and some examples of their participation with your school. The following businesses participated in our Trunk or Treat and Fall Festival event here at Roseburg. Roseburg Fire Department, Dean Farms, Town of Roseburg, Birchwood Farms, Starting Points, B&M Auto, Lions Club, Roseburg Park, Roseburg Ambulance, Roseburg Volunteer or VFW, Roseburg Mercantile, Clear Mountain Bank, and then Bruce Stone, the owner of the Mercantile, sits on our LSIC committee, and Clear Mountain Bank provides gold dollars to students with perfect attendance report.
All right, and with Roseburg, the list is just as long, and you have them there. We won't read through all of those, but you see who our partners are for Fellows. Yes, and we have. If you're looking for cheap gas, Warford is $2.89 a gallon right now in Fellows. And they reached out to us when they moved and said, we want to be a partner with you in education. They used, how much did they give us? $1,000. You know, just because they moved across the street from us. And that's incredible. Yes.
Call attention. I know you came by number 2. I did want to commend Fellows on the beautification front. Looks very nice in terms of the gardens, and the new signage up there as well. So
yes.
Thank you. We worked a lot of
I appreciate that.
I think it looks very nice.
Thank you.
Miss Gribble, Roberta, her dad wanted a boy, didn't get it, so it was Robert with an A, Roberta. She almost single-handedly painted the entire building outside. And I'm not kidding. She was out there, and she can tell you things in the building that needs to be taken care of because she's been all over that building.
I was looking for all that done, and that did very nice.
Yes, she did a very good job. Okay, number 4 on the list for LSIC. It says, list some examples of programs your school is involved with that address such areas as student achievement, recognition, at-risk, and citizenship. Who would like to talk about that?
I can do that.
Okay, that's Donnie Lane.
Yeah, great. So what we have here, so again, list some examples of programs your school is involved with that address such areas such as student achievement, recognition, at-risk, citizenship, etc. PBIS, we're trying to get that program going in both schools. Some teachers have already, individually started implementing that through, their different ways. And I'm trying to make, as the counselor, I want to be a part of that as well, so there needs to be some collaboration there on my end with them. Of course, me working with individuals and, you know, trying to meet their basic needs, talking with them, small groups at each schools, classroom lessons, of course, the student assistance team, whenever that is needed, meetings for academics, awards ceremonies for student recognition, and then, of course, the attendance incentives that we mentioned earlier.
I want to go back to number 3 on LSIC. I think I skipped over that. And I'm going to let Mary Ann address this for Fellows-ville. And Mr. Bruce Wayne, what is his last name? Stone, yeah, Mr. Stone. His name is Bruce Wayne. His son is named Bruce Wayne. This is really cool. But he brought up this same question about this school. And I'm going to let Mary Ann address this first for Fellows-ville. It's for next year, and you guys have brought that up in the discussion.
On number 3, some of this we have already spoken to Mr. Martin with, but just to let the board be aware. Mr. Cummings has said he was going to retire the end of this year. I got it, sorry. But our staff is concerned that when a person is selected for the administration of the building, that you would please look at the disciplinary policies of the person that's coming in. We would really like for you to consider someone that will stand firm on what they say. If they say it, follow through, whether they like to follow through or not. And at our school, we try to do that. If we set a consequence for something, for behavior, we follow through with it as much as we can. So we really want, as far as our kids go, somebody that they can depend on to do what they say they're going to do. That was a concern that was brought up in our faculty senate meeting recently, and they wanted it to be brought out this evening. Second thing is that we know there will be cuts and rips and all those things that happens every year. And we also know that countywide that the attendance has dropped. If it would come to that, to where for example, our fifth grade left our building last year because the number was so low, and we could understand that was, and we didn't want another split for those kids. But our numbers are up again. Our numbers have increased. And there again, going back to that data, we'd like to have that challenge, that one more year with them. So if the numbers would show that that a teacher would need to be hired for a combination of, I guess you'd say, all 3 classrooms from the South Preston classrooms, and including the 4th grade classroom at Fellows-ville, that you might consider allowing a teacher to come back to our building, if that would be the case, if you have enough students to need 3 teachers. We have the room, the facility, we have the materials, we have the gumption to do it. You know, we would love for our kids to stay another year. Give them that one more year before middle school, going into middle school. We're passionate about this, but we also want you to know we understand where you guys come from and the numbers and how you have to see how the numbers are going countywide and what needs to be done for the good of all. But we just want to put it out there that we really want you to consider that if there would be a need for a third teacher, for that grouping of fourth graders going into fifth grade, that you might consider putting the fifth grade back at Bellows-Ville Elementary.
And that was as part of discussions.
Yes, yes, and that's.
Enrollment to see if we would have to accommodate an extra hire in South
Yes.
Preston anyway, we would certainly now that would be something that would be posed to the board, of course.
Right.
And Ms. Barr will continue to assess.
Just wanted to put it out there, so just in the back of your mind. That was all of them.
I don't care that you do another Mary Ann, that took a long time. I'll put everything in perspective, she wants fifth grade back in Fellows, that's what she wants.
But not at the cost of another.
Okay, let's get that last one. Come on up here. Holly. Yes, Ms. Green, right? Yes.
I am a parent, volunteer, community liaison, and we have been working very hard to get community involvement up. We do have a lot more parent volunteers this year. We have them coming in to organize our library. They're assisting with classroom parties, school programs, our family fun nights. We've also put in a lot more community partners this year. We actually just partnered with Starting Points in Kingwood to give us books for all of our family fun nights. And National Youth Science Center in Davis is going to be providing STEM kits for us for our STEM night, and then we want to do a future partnership for like a monthly basis for STEM kits. So the PTO and our LSIC go together. We work very well together. Couldn't do without them. And like I said, our parental involvement is increasing. Not where we want it to be, but it is. We see a huge difference in getting them in here and helping them out. Good thing we've done is Facebook. Facebook has really gotten the word out there. We just had our first family fun night. We had a good turnout. We were very happy about it. So we're working together to get that community and parent involvement up. Okay.
I'm Christine Feathers, and this is Roberta Gribble, and we are the co-presidents of the PTO, but also just like with LSIC and PTO in small schools, we are basically the same folks. So we have this past year and over the last several years, we have done all kinds of different projects together to really improve our relationship with kids in our school. One thing we really especially like is that we can come and visit school to set up things like Santa's workshop, which we did last week. And kids, we don't even necessarily know their names, but they just come up and they see a happy face, a familiar face, and they just give us hugs. And we love it, it's great. So that happens often because we are, as the LSIC and PTO parents, we are very involved regularly at the school. So we are familiar faces to them. So coming up, well, recently we just finished up our Santa's workshop. We like to do that because it really gives our kids a chance to shop for their families in ways that they would not necessarily be able to do otherwise. We are getting ready for fundraising, and that all this fundraising that we do is allowing us to take them to great places. Earlier this year, we went to French Creek. We're hoping to take a trip to Carnegie, the Science Center. Last year, we were able to go to the zoo, and let's see what else. We have what five regular PTO volunteers in LSIC. We do the yearbook as a group, and that's really great to get families involved with that project. What else am I saying?
I mean, this year we've seen a lot of extra folks on our volunteer list. We have a lot of new families with our student population increasing, so we're welcoming a lot of new faces, and that's been wonderful.
We've got some different events coming up for our community involvement activities. Last year we did a great music event where we brought in some folks from WVU to do dance and percussion and printmaking. So it was art and music. That was a great event. We got a lot of families coming in for that. This year we have coming up a STEM night with Spark Science Center. They're going to come to our school on a Friday night. So that's all kind of what we do at the school. And we did one other thing. Sure. Yeah. So we had it all was together. So we incorporated a reading theme into our trunk or treat, and we're able to provide books for every single child at school. We were able to do some read alouds and just had a great time reading probably like 100 to 200 families and kids out to our school, and kids that aren't even involved in our school, and families that don't come to our school.
They don't limit this to just our school. When these ladies offer something out there for our students, and it's after school, they invite anyone to come in, and that's awesome. Also, they talked about the Santa's workshop. Now, that was during school, but they made every effort that it didn't interrupt the classrooms. They'd go get the children that had, and they made sure every child in that school was able to get something for their families.
Even if they didn't have money,
Yeah.
we made sure that was provided for them.
And they had it all wrapped and labeled for the children, and the children didn't have to, the children told them who it was for, and they went back to class. They took care of the rest. And they didn't interrupt the classroom teachers. They didn't come in and say, here's this kid's stuff. No, it was put in the hallway, down at the end of the hallway, and as we dismissed school, they just picked up their bag and got from us. So I was so proud of these ladies, knowing that we don't want instructional time taken away from our kids. And they made every effort to make sure every child was taken care of, and that nothing was interrupted between the classrooms. It was wonderful, and we appreciate them so much.
We really like working with our teachers very closely, because that's why our kids attend that school, is because of the great teachers, and we want to make sure that they're getting that opportunity that can be complete during their days.
So I just wanted to say, it's really hard to convey everything to you all just in a few words. You're getting a brief snapshot, but I really hope that you notice, and I'm speaking for my school, and if I can be as presumptuous as to speak for Fellows,ville, so both our schools have such a community spirit. Everybody works so well together, and that's what, we have heart and we care, and that's why I've been here since the dinosaurs roamed the earth, because it's that feeling, and it's that everybody's pulling together. And I could go on and on about how appreciative I am of all these people that have helped and just help support our kids. So I just want to make sure to get that out and say thank you to everybody for everything that they've done.
And I'd like to thank we have one of our custodians here this evening, but our custodians help each other so well. If one of our schools, needs something, they're always contacting each other to help each other out. We were a little bit hesitant when we were sharing the principal, although there's plenty to share. But I'm sorry. This is how we get along. I'm sorry. We just pick on each other. He'll get me later. He really will. But Art and our custodian Angie, they work so well together, and they do so much for our building and so much for our kids. All the cleaning and extra cleaning they did during the COVID and all those things to get our kids back into school. They're not recognized enough. They're not recognized enough for what they do for our school, and they're a part of us. It's not professional service. We're not like that. Yeah.
All right. And I was told not to say this. Any questions?
Thank you. I think your group did a great job presenting tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
And we are proud to have you here. And even though it's late, we're excited when you guys come in because we want to show you what we do and how we do it and why we're successful. We want you to see that. And with brand new hires like Holly, who's just starting out with her kids in this school as young children, and a lot of times you'll see her with a little one hanging on her leg while she's here at the school working. And to see one who was here when the dinosaurs roamed with Angie and everywhere in between. We really, and we complain, oh, we got it, when the board's coming, we got it. But we're glad that you're here because we want to showcase what we do. And we want you to understand that there is a difference between these schools. Just like every other school claims something different. But the relationship between Mary Ann and I and the teachers, and now it's beginning to develop with the teachers here, it's an incredible thing. And it's a difference when you hate to go to work and when you love coming to work. And that's the atmosphere that you're feeling in Rollsburg and Fellows-ville. It's such a tight-knit thing that we love coming and working together. And we want to thank you for being here with us tonight. We really do. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you all.
I got one question. I know it's not a cat question, but with our decline numbers this year again, the 7 teachers we're looking at cutting back, is there any suggestions you might give us for the low numbers in Rollsburg as a way out or some other way to keep the school functioning?
Rollsburg, and it's hard for me because this is only my second year here. But you look at, there's no families here. It's just really, I think it's a community that at one time was thriving, and the families just aren't here. I do have a suggestion for the board. I think that this school could serve as a dual purpose. I think it's a perfect location for an alternative program. And I took 2 of the board members around that's never seen the building. This building rivals any new building that's been built in the county. This gymnasium, this is an incredible gymnasium. It's got full bathrooms, both men and women's locker rooms they're exceptional. It's just a nice field out here. It can be turned into a ball field very easily. I think that the community would be better served if the school, and Angie won't like to hear this, but everything upstairs needs to be moved downstairs. And the alternative school needs to go upstairs. That's what I think should happen at this school. I think you could keep your elementary through middle school here, but you all are the wise people that'll have to make that decision. But for this beautiful facilities not to be used, to me, it just doesn't make sense. But an alternative program, and anyone here that has kids in different areas, we have the principal of the high school here. And I know, I worked at the high school. I worked with Mr. Huggins. He and I worked side by side together. And to have all of those issues that they have at the high school with all the discipline, wouldn't it be nice to have a place to send them to get them out of that area and have them come here for their education? That's just what I think. And, I worked in Pennsylvania in that county there. They had a separate school just for that. And I think that this county has a blessing here if they would make an action on that and meet that situation right here.
Something maybe less crazy. But I think that a lot of the parents that were here with their children had saw so much of the split classrooms.
And they left, yes.
Yeah, well, this is just a suggestion, but if there was a way to find funding somehow for an aid in the 3-5 split, is it 3-5?
3-5 and K2.
Yeah. They already have classroom aid in the K2, but if there was an aid that could help in that 3-5 split, I think that might encourage the parents, them to say, okay, we're trying to get the ratio of children per teacher, per staff, even it out a little more, give you a little more help in these classrooms.
And if you look at the data, we have a good quality young lady, and I'm not saying that the rest of them aren't in our 3-5 split, but it's hard to retain them. Every year we get turnovers, we get brand new teachers, and if you don't have that continuity of growth with a student and a teacher, you lose something there. And like Angie Williams, Holly's sitting here. Angie was her teacher, and so Holly comes back, and when you have that relationship, and it doesn't come down to anything other than that, being able to develop a relationship with kids. If we could retain teachers here, but with rifts happening, and you have sometimes it's a day that separates seniority from one teacher to another, and they move and they're out because of the day. Sometimes even minutes. Whoever signs the document a minute before the other, it comes down to that. And whenever you tell someone that they're going to teach in a 3-5 split, everybody says, "Oh, that's a terrible position." They are so absolutely wrong. It is one of the most wonderful scaffolding positions that you could ever teach, especially in elementary, because you have such a diverse learning. We ought to do away with grade levels anyway. Kids ought to move by their ability. And when they are in a K-1-2 split, you might have a kindergarten kid whose mom and dad read to them every night, and they're on a second grade level. What more of a better atmosphere can they be in than to say, well, we're teaching second grade right here? It is, and if you go back in history, the United States was born on single school classrooms. That's all they ever had was one teacher teaching all these kids. So it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. But 40 kids doesn't fill this building. But if you have an alternative program here, that would. And that's what my suggestion is, Mr. Ziegler.
Well, we looked at alternative classes the last couple of years, and just numbers and busing created some of the problems.
I think probably your biggest problem is going to be the Bruce area. That's a distance. I don't know what we would do with that, but I think the majority of the rest of the county could be here within a certain amount of time with buses. And I know that that's an issue. It'd be nice to pick this building up and set it somewhere else, but I think that it could probably work out. I really do.
Well, what concerns me, your largest classes are in 6th and 7th grade.
Yes.
And then you've got 2 in 3rd grade, 2 in 2nd grade, 3 pre-K, you got 7 in 1st grade, so the numbers are dropping.
Well, we don't have a pre-K, that would be K. There's no pre-K at Rollsburg.
There's 2 numbers here.
Well, they would be going to Kingwood. Yeah, they're in Kingwood. And I'll tell you, when pre-K left Fellows, that's when the numbers dropped. When pre-K came back, we're over 90 right now. And if the 5th grade was brought back, we'd be over 100 kids, which is where Fellows, around 120. So the pre-K was the life and death of Fellows. Pre-K not being in a school, and a child goes someplace for pre-K, they just stay. They're going to stay there because they get to know the teachers. And that's what happens. Opening a pre-K in Rollsburg, I don't know how that would work. But I do know, and Mary Ann's correct, a lot of kids left. I think there was like 25 kids that left Rollsburg because of the split classes. They said, we don't want to be in split classes. A lot of them went to Central. Some of them went to Kingwood. I think there's some that maybe went to Aurora. But we actually had kids from Terre Haute transfer here because of the size of the classes. And those kids are doing better in a smaller classroom area.
Yeah, I mean, the size of classes, everybody would love to have 10 kids.
Absolutely, yeah, right.
But that's just not possible.
Yeah.
But we appreciate your ideas.
Let me just say before you go, thank you for the cognizant effort to not interrupt instructional time. The wonderful things that we do for the students, but for that cognizant effort and putting that in, I truly appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, thank you all. I do appreciate it. Appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Even if you are the whole school. We do appreciate you. Okay, moving on, at this time, I'll entertain a motion for the board to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Taylor, second by Mrs. Phelps. Any questions? Call for the vote. Mr. Warren.
Voting is open.
Got that.
Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on, at this time, entertain a motion to recommend the board approve the meeting minutes from 11/28/22 meeting.
Motion.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Ziegler, second by Mrs. Phelps. Any corrections or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Moving on, now entertain a motion to approve the minutes from 12/5/22.
Got motion.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, second by Mr. Kissel. Any corrections or additions? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next on the agenda, Mr. Martin, Superintendent's report.
Okay, board members, my packet, it's in your main packets. You have two, you have one that's large, which made some of the requested information from last meeting. The smaller one, the superintendent's update is listed there. Again, you all would have received the weekly superintendent's update this week. That was emailed this morning to all substitute professional staff. Just to quickly look at that item. We've been continuing with our data meetings, which I'll reference here in a moment. We do have a 2-hour early dismissal on Thursday. I'm hopeful, I don't want to be in a situation where I have to do a 2-hour delay and a 2-hour early dismissal. Weather is, we'll have to see on the weather. We're very hopeful. I think a huge thing, guys, is, I'm really hopeful that the weather will be cooperative this year, because I think a true key to success is where we're not going and having multiple snow days and very choppy in our schedule. So I'm very hopeful that we can get through this week, and if we can get into January with only having used one snow day thus far, that's not a terrible place to be. We do have some staff development and professional learning day scheduled when we return. I'll also be meeting with faculty senate reps at 3:30 on that return date. In regards, we do have, I have tentatively scheduled a legislative work session at 5:30 on January 4th. I've received confirmations from Mr. Jennings, Mr. Street. Literally when our meeting started tonight, I got a call from Mr. Smith, and I'll have to contact our new senator-elect in Taylor County. I believe his name is Mr. Taylor. So I will do my level best to have all of them scheduled in. That will give them an opportunity to kind of discuss some of their priorities. With the school district and school board have expressed some of our potential concerns going into the legislative session. Again, I have 2 confirmations. I will contact Mr. Smith, but we are looking at, that's actually the week prior to the session starting. Although in speaking with the delegates, it appears they'll start in with initial meetings that Monday. We, of course, have a board meeting scheduled on January 9th. That is back at the boardroom. That is a 10 a.m. start. So as you continue to look through just other information that you had an opportunity to review this morning. Now, to actually look through the agenda, board members, you should have gotten a copy of the Beat of Excellence magazine. Should have been, I think, right there with your stuff. Whoops, I knocked my nameplate off. A couple other things, guys, in terms of maintenance. Sutter Roofing has begun work over at West. I actually showed some photos where they're working on the roofing section over there near the old main office area. So this is Lane's room, if you're familiar with the buildings where they were working the other day. Guttering and snow ice shield work at Tower East Preston, and Mr. Tiffany, we discussed that. That work was done by WD Gutter Works out of Rollsburg, so at that junction we addressed those issues. Again, the safe entryway, we'll go out the bid submission process will be in mid-February with the intent to start that project basically late spring, so right as school's ending, you want to get right into that project in the hopes that we can have that project wrapped right at the start of the next academic year. Right now, demolition of the old bleachers at West Preston is ready to commence. Mr. Murray's continuing to work with that vendor to establish when they will start that work date. A few other things that Thrasher is working on for us, guys, as we look through. We do have a major exterior door project at DHS in the works. In addition to West Preston, we're looking at the potential construction of the concessions area, looking at interior doors, which has been a major point of concern listed by teachers at school. And the fact they don't really have, if you're familiar with the building, they have pod classrooms where you don't have the means of physically locking any of those doorways. So what we're looking at is, I believe it's 3 to 4 doors that would be constructed in the hallways so that we can secure those pod classrooms from the hallway section. That'll be part of that project as well. Really, to get better economy of scale, we wanted to lump multiple things in when we were doing work at West Preston. The maintenance database is listed, and one update is Mr. Murray will be reporting out with our anticipated levy-based projects that will be in line with our CEFP at our January 9th meeting. I have been in contact with the Department of Highways about the installation of the three school zone flashers along Route 92. This was something that Mrs. Stone, who's an employee of ours, also the president of the county commission, had brought up to the board last year. If you look in your packets, guys, there's actually a diagram of potential placement. The one thing I would say in looking at this, I actually went over to West the other day and took some photos of what's in down. The one that's in the triangle there that's listed as news, it's basically on the triangle that's the closest to the church. I would really like to see that progress further up 92, because as you start to crest the top of the hill, that's where you want to, right. Well, you want to make that notification as quickly as possible. So, I mean, I'm looking at his place, but he's much further down towards the school. I would like to take that up the hill as far as possible to provide notification. If you go back the other way towards Reedsville, that's basically, I've taken some photos there, and again, I would really prefer that he go on up beyond some of those. You can kind of see the driveways on there that are listed. It's in between two existing driveways. I would again prefer to be a little bit further up 92. They are also proposing one coming off the X road. I think part of the reason that there's an agreement to put these in is there are potential walkers that come from the Arkansas side that walk across the road, so they felt that there was a need there. The good thing about this is we would have to incur the initial cost of the project, but this would be fully reimbursable from the Department of Highways. So there'll be substantial costs. Well, Mr. Huggins, I mean, I look at these signals online, and I think they'll have to be of certain specifications from the Department of Highways. Yeah, it's crept up a bit. So I mean, we're going to have again that upfront cost, but my understanding is it's a fully reimbursable project. So we're excited about that. A few other things. Central office team, we've been traveling around doing our required. We are required to do quarterly data meetings in all schools. We did the first set back in September. We did a reschedule today. We had 2 data meetings scheduled last Thursday on our snow day. So this morning, we went to Aurora first thing, then we went to Terralta, and we have actually Central Preston and South Preston are scheduled tomorrow. That is the last. That will be our 9th and 10th meeting. If you kind of look through some of the topics that were covered during these, we reevaluated the goals that were established during quarter 1, and they established goals for the quarter moving forward. We updated work on completed by teachers and professional learning communities. Again, some of the presentations you heard, for example, Mrs. Williams referenced PLCs. It's an acronym for Professional Learning Community. It's where they work to really find a more targeted, focused discussion on topics specific to student achievement. We also discussed walkthrough data that we use an online platform called We Climb. I think some schools have been a little more proficient in utilizing that tool than others, but it really gives administration a means of submitting an online walkthrough that then is automatically emailed to the teachers, which then can elicit good dialogue and discussion following the walkthrough. We also discussed the school's work with district academic coaches, and they can indicate any anticipated future needs on that front. They identify the weakest domain areas from the already benchmark assessments. One thing I can say, Mrs. Martin, you've sat in a lot of those meetings. I think vocabulary skills has come up pretty uniformly in most schools to say vocabulary skills has been a weakness area in English language arts. Geometry skills, even though geometry skills have been a point of focus this year, we've actually tried to move up where we would typically assess geometry skills earlier in the instructional year, because that's inevitably kind of been tacked on at the back end of the year, and we really typically see very poor results in geometry. By covering that skill earlier in the year, you hope that if a child can pick up that skill and have the ability to answer 1, 2, or 3 more questions on an assessment, it can dramatically drive their scores up. So that was kind of the intent behind that. But overall, I think I was really pleased with our data meetings. I think they've gone well. And again, we'll wrap up tomorrow with Central and with South Preston. Mrs. Feathers, I know you had asked previously for information on the behavior indicator, how they basically factor behavior indicators on the state reporting. That is also included in your packets. Board members, you can have an opportunity to review that. That just kind of breaks out how that actually is reported. So they give you the metric, and then they also give you an example of like with specific. One number they'll throw out there, or one acronym they'll show out there is FAY that you'll see and it's referenced there. That stands for full academic year. The student has to be in the school, what is this, 135 days? So they must be present in the school for 135 days to be able to be factored in to count for accountability as it relates to testing, behavior, any of the metrics that are reported out by the state. So, Pam, I know you were wanting that information, so I want to make sure we got that to you. Again, our legislators are right now. We know that at least our members from the House of Delegates plan to be here on the 4th, and I'll work to see if we can get Senator Smith and Senator Taylor here as well. Our next board meeting is Monday the 9th, and it will be at the Board of Education offices. We still have 3 more meetings out in our LSICs. We have meetings still scheduled in January and February at Preston High School, at South Preston, and at West Preston. Okay, any questions from me? Yes, Colin.
For the January 4th legislative work session with the delegates and senators, is that going to be at the board?
It will be at the board, and Colin, that would also be the general public will be invited to as well, our teachers and staff and other members of the public.
Okay.
So anyone can attend.
Did you say 5:30?
5:30.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
In your packet, under curriculum and technology updates, there's a K-5 Discovery Silence pilot listed. What is the difference between that and, like, tonight we had a pilot proposed? Was that one that was proposed at a previous meeting and already adopted?
If it was in my superintendent's update, honestly, that is just information sent by the West Virginia Department of Education. That's not nothing that we're necessarily actively participating in. These are just various opportunities we're out there.
Okay, thank you.
Update on the welding.
Mrs. Varner, any update on the welding room?
I am meeting Champus, and the WVU professor came down with COVID, so they weren't able to come up when they were supposed to. So they're actually going to come up over Christmas, the week of our Christmas break,
All right.
when they could all come up together.
Trappist will be there when that happens.
Trampus, Troy, and the WVU engineer will all be there together.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Mr. Evans.
Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is the student representative report, and I'm not sure which one's which. So I'm gonna click on the first one, which has...
Colin has some drafts listed, and then Audrey has submitted a written product.
Okay,
so we can kind of really start.
Audrey's is number 2, number 1 was behind.
Okay, Mr. Savage, thank you for I didn't see that. Is it in there, or that's correct?
The second one has the name of the first one.
All right.
Mr. Savage, you're up, sir.
Okay, so my student report, it's a whole lot shorter than my last one at the last meeting. In fact, I actually calculated it was 7 minutes long. I would apologize for that, but I kind of sense that was important, but this one's a lot shorter. I think it's still important. On the 5th of December, school administrators and I discussed the results of a survey that was sent out to Preston High School students on November 8th. The purpose of the survey given out was to try to figure out why students are having many absences. At this meeting, I was given results of the survey at this meeting. Here are the results of the survey conducted by the school admin. All right, number 2B, majority of students have answered that they have missed no more than 5 days. At the graph, that says that 84 answered that. Majority of students answered that they turned in absence notes, and at the graph, that says 134 answered that they do.
Absolutely.
And then majority of students answered that they missed school because they were sick, and at the graph, it says that 102 students answered that. So I didn't really, I mean, I kind of expected that most kids would kind of just jot down that they're sick, but really, I mean, that's what the data shows. They're missing school because they're sick.
Mr. Morton, can you see time on this? I don't know if it was last meeting, a couple meetings ago, they talked about the absence slip on, I can't.
Mrs. Shaker.
Has that been?
I don't know, no, it has not been incorporated, Mr. Huggins, and I'll just see what information I can give you, Mrs. Shaker, as to the status on that project.
Okay, I mean, that gives more way for parents, because one of the things students at all levels, is at the middle school, and parents struggle to think the high school, but we know a lot about it. You know, we dumped in the kid's backpack, there's 5 notes from the doctor because they had been there. And this would just give a parent another way, which we may change those numbers. But thank you, that's a very good data to have, and that's based on this part of this year.
Yes.
Okay.
That's really all it's on mine.
Mr. Martin, have we ever considered making an email or a fax number available for doctors to send them straight the same as they, like doctors will send prescriptions, right? So we do have that.
Mr. Kennedy, typically, doctor's offices are very remiss to send it any other way other than fax.
Okay.
Which I've never really had a great understanding because our fax machines often are not necessarily in the most secure locations.
Yeah.
To me, an encrypted email feels more secure than that, but that's very, very.
But we do have that availability.
Yeah,
we have a resource for doctors' offices, because I thought my kids offered to do that, but I wasn't sure. I thought better ask.
Even with employees, when they have medical issues, they will frequently fax them in to us. That's usually the mechanism they do that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
When I had my hip replaced, that's what we did. I had faxes to the office instead of the school, so they had the finance office do that.
Mr. Huggins, Ms. Audrey also had.
You are next, Ms. Wood.
So regarding the attendance meeting that Colin was just going over, it showed that obviously students are majority sick or majority don't come to school because they are sick, but then that other percent is just because they don't want to. So to increase attendance, there could be a reward, and I talked to some teachers at the school, and we could do a finals incentive. So those students who have good enough attendance could be excused from taking some of their finals, not all of their finals, because not taking any finals doesn't prepare them for college. So taking finals would give them that preparation, but excusing the majority would be a really great incentive for those who do attend school regularly.
And Audrey, I do think at one time we had something in place like that, and it was effective, but I appreciate you recognizing the fact that there's still a need and skill there.
Yes, exactly.
That students want to progress. So I definitely appreciate the insight, and really both of you. Colin, I think you need to go out and try to gather information, and Audrey the same, but also to offer some potential suggestions as well. So really appreciate you guys digging in on this, and thank you for your work today.
Mr. Martin, I think when we were in school, it was if you missed less than 5 days, you didn't have to pay a fine.
Yeah, there was definitely something.
I was going to say, I know my history in high school, I graduated in 2002, but if you had above a C average and you missed less than 5 days, or however, whatever that excused, or however that went, because I know I missed a lot more than 5, but they were always a lot of educational stuff, but you didn't have to take any finals. And I do think that, again, those students that are preparing for the next level, I think it would be great if they had the opportunity to take the final and say that, or take ones, or even be able to take, again, if we were to look at a policy or something of that nature, but to say, take it as just optional to get the experience or the practice for college if you want to. But I mean, again, we were exempt from all of them if we had high enough grade in the class.
And I do think
that was a motivation for me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do think it was a motivator for such students. So, I mean, Mr. Seymour, that's something maybe that could be discussed with the faculty senate process as well, with Preston, as to if they feel like this is something that might be down the line where we could implement maybe, we can't really implement it midstream at this point, but that would be something we would look at.
I mean, that's something we could definitely send to our curriculum team to look at and see what they say, but we're not opposed to it, absolutely not. But I agree with Audrey that they need to take some finals.
Right.
Especially for those kids who are going to go to college.
Right.
Or tech school.
I'm sorry, go ahead, I interrupted you.
No, that was done.
The only curveball I see with that is administrative. As a kid, I want to take first period and seventh period. What do you do with them for the class periods 2, 3, 4, 5, 6?
Logistically.
They study for the 7th period exam.
Yeah.
What's that?
They study for the 7th period exam.
Well, I understand. I mean, that's because I can see some kids doing that.
No. Yes.
You know, and it's, but I'm for that. When it's
Yeah.
teachers, our attendance dropped tremendously when we cut it.
Yeah.
And the board's logic in it was from the teachers' high school was to take for college. I mean, in defense of the board when they changed it. From what she's talking about, if you guys could come up with it, I think it's a great idea. Where you have two. The other thing, probably if they're flunking, that probably should automatically be.
Oh yeah, there should be a GPA requirement, and personally, I would think you would have to take 2 core.
Yeah.
Like you're not taking Art 4 and Life Fitness
2 of your 4
finals. You know what I'm saying?
Unless seniors may not have those.
Not that those aren't any good. Any of you watching on TV, I don't think they're great courses to take finals on. You know.
No, I'm just saying because you may have some seniors that they would when they have English and history, they would still have 2 their senior year. You still have English.
Most seniors have to take English, math, and history.
Yes.
Now there are some who don't. Those technically, those ones who took algebra in 8th grade wouldn't necessarily need to take them. But if they're all in college, we always encourage them to take a math. And a lot of times the colleges look for them to take that 5th math. The other possibility is those freshmen who have had Algebra 1 and then Algebra Support their freshman year, they can be done by their junior year with their 4 maths. And
that's something you can work out.
But yeah, that's something we can work out. Yeah.
You could also make that policy, and Mr. Huggins, I did this when we taught, it could only make you better and cannot drop your grade.
Right.
And so you can have kids come in and take an exam, get the experience, but them know it will not drop. And so even kids that don't have to come in, they want to come in and try to do better with their grade.
Okay, Mr. Savage.
Yeah, I do have a concern about the whole not, being allowed to not take a final thing. I think that's fine as long as you're not being allowed to not take finals for your core classes, because your core classes are core classes for a reason. You need those classes for college. So what I'm thinking is, yes, you have the reward not taking a final for classes that you don't necessarily need.
One of the things you got to remember though, not everybody is college bound.
Right.
And so in the vocational schools, a lot of the vocational schools, in the CTE classes, let me rephrase that because I'm old, but a lot of those have finals anyhow, hands-on projects, okay? So it's a balance, and that's where it goes back in front of the faculty senate, and you two working with them and putting your ideas and talking to the kids, your fellow students, and then coming back with a possibility. And I'm not saying it's going to be, but at least gives a good faith effort that we're listening to you guys as student representatives, working with the principal and the teachers.
So I have a question for the board, and I guess for the principal too. Is there a requirement for how a final has to be? Like, do they have to be exams? Because I'm in a theater class, and a final for a theater class is not a written test. You have to
The answer to that is it has to be a summative assessment of some kind.
Right.
So theater, you may have to act out something that you've been working on. For art, it could be a final project that incorporates everything you've done throughout the year.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily a quote test that everyone thinks about. I mean, of course, it's usually in math, it's going to be a test.
Yeah.
Okay, but in English, it may be a paper. You know what I'm saying? So it's some kind of summative assessment that wraps up everything you've done for the year.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, moving on then, thank you, and thank you, Board Stephen, for bringing that to us, and looking forward to what we hear this evening. Moving on, service personnel. At this time, I entertain a motion for the board to recommend the service personnel agenda.
I'll make that.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Seagrave, seconded by Mrs. Smith. Any questions or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving on. At this time, I entertain a motion for the board to approve the professional agenda.
Second.
Moved by Mr. McKinney, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any comments, questions?
I have a question. The parent community volunteer liaison, isn't a volunteer non-paid?
I think it's, they're working to like organize volunteers. I'm not sure that it's actually a volunteer position. Am I correct in that, Mrs. Varner?
It's paid.
That's similar to the young lady who's in here
That
from
was
World's
here.
Essentially, it's the volunteer coordinator, not the volunteer.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not a volunteer position. It's helping to organize volunteers working within schools.
The only other question I have is not, it sort of aligns, but the job postings that are put up on the site, what determines the length of the period? Like, some of them are like 5 days, whereas some of them are 5 months.
They have to be at least 5. We have some that if they go unfulfilled, we just keep them up.
We just keep them
Like I said, until filled.
until filled position.
So 5 days is our standard for any? And it's just a matter of essentially somebody just check, people just check the website that are looking for
That's the
jobs.
minimum. Well, we also post to the state site, and there's an initiative, actually, the superintendent's update, they reference that the state is moving to a new job posting system. With the minimum requirement for position, it has to be put up at least 5 days. Now, we might have some positions if we're seeking maybe a deeper applicant field. We can go with a longer posting period, but it has to be at least at 5 days.
Yeah, I just thought 5 was rather limiting the scope of opportunity, but that's what I was asking, is how that was determined. But in general, most positions go for 5 days. If you see it as something that's becoming hard to get, then you post it for a longer period, if I understand correctly.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Structural coaches, those are just previous jobs that somebody
Has
bid out into another job.
We've had a resignation. We have that would be the one that's resignation, but we also currently have an individual on
Maternity leave.
Several hours.
Nothing new.
No, it's not a new position.
Okay, any other questions? Hearing none, call for the vote.
Voting's open. Motion passes 5-0.
This is the professional out-of-state field trips. I had it on, there was the trips.
I'll make it.
I don't think we have it.
No.
We don't have any submitted.
Oh, I'm sorry, we're educational leaders.
Oh.
I had the wrong one too.
There are education leaders, there's no
Yeah, I'm
out-of-state
sorry.
field trips. I'm sorry, I should have got that recommendation out.
That's okay, that's my fault. No problem. Chaperone list is none.
We don't have any chaperones out.
Okay, at this time, I entertain a motion for the board to approve the cash vending proposal from Vending Solutions to provide beverage and snack options to Preston County schools.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any questions or comments?
And you probably wouldn't know this off the top of your head, Mr. Mark, but do you know at all, have any idea how much we make off of that a year?
I don't, Mr. Kisner, I mean, I can try to get, I can consult finance and Mrs. Dorr.
Each school is different.
Do you have any idea, Mr.
Yeah,
Barnes?
each school is different. Every
Yeah.
school is different.
If we could look at what we make off that year as a total, I mean, I felt like the bid was fairly, well, it's just that they obviously are aware that there's no competition. And I don't know what the normal profit margin is. I know that with other clients, I've got clients that do their own vending and look at a 50% profit. I mean, if we could look at what we're making on a 10% profit, that's a job. I mean, potentially, right? That's a job we can have here in the county that we're providing as opposed to even another state coming in doing it. So again, not something I want to have to be a major pain in your side, but if finance could give us a report on what we're currently making from that, I would.
I was anticipating we don't make significant revenue, probably any other state except, I mean, the high school is where you make money.
Yeah. And that's what I assume is the high school is the only place that you.
Yeah, I believe I don't know that any of our other sites are student accessible. These are, for example, in lounge areas. So it's more so staff.
It's more for staff.
Now, at the high school, I believe we do have some
Student access.
some locations that are student accessible. They typically have those on timers or something like that.
Not
because
during
it's some time of
lunches.
day in the past.
They said they had the potential. I didn't know if we implemented that.
I would anticipate that there'll be some type of time option on those.
Because of lunch.
Yes.
You could do it half hour before, half hour after.
Yes.
And the machine's on, so you wouldn't work.
Yeah. Well, it said in the bid that all of their machines had the ability for on-off timers, all of them have an electronic payment method. I mean, they're offering obviously some fairly sophisticated machines as far as things go. I just was curious. I just have no idea if we're dealing in the thousands, tens of thousands, or whatever. It's like as far as what we're doing, but just would be curious to look at that.
And this is a new one, because this is new, because
Oh,
last
really?
year we were at Pepsi, and Pepsi chose not to come back.
Pepsi did not submit a bid on it.
Yeah, they chose not to resubmit.
But you're saying this is the first year for this?
This will be a new
Oh,
company.
okay. I thought it even read as if they had done it in the past, like, because they said they wouldn't replace machines because the ones that were there were already there.
They did do it in the past, because they said they've been seven.
Yeah, they said that the machines that were there, they were going to leave, and if we wanted to replace, they'd have no interest. So
Yeah.
I'm under the
Unless
impression
that
they
vendor has changed it. It's the EJ Vending that had a contract there.
Yes.
But that's not the name of this.
No, this group bought out EJ.
That's what I thought. I think there's going to be.
So they're partially in some of the schools, but they're not in all of them.
Well, the bid even said they were only interested if we would accept them at the subset of schools that they were willing to do. They were not willing to do them all.
Right.
So, I mean, they just said, like, if you didn't like the machines that were there, they would not entertain any request to swap them. The machines that were there represented what their entirety had. So anyway, you guys are familiar. I just thought if we can get that data, I would just be interested. Even if you send to an email, it doesn't necessarily have to come to another meeting without, unless, depending on the numbers, we'll decide.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Call for the vote.
Ready to go? Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, next, at this time, entertain a motion from the board to approve Preston County Schools Policy 6-11 on the first reading for final approval on 1/9/23.
And this was done by Dr. Rozier in consultation with Mrs. Durr, and I don't know if it's any legislative changes that prompted this. This is only going out again, for first read. We would put this on the 9th agenda for final approval.
So we're voting tonight on the first reading?
Correct. And any modifications to the existing policy, you'll see any straight throughs are marked in yellow with any changes to the existing policy.
Okay, entertain a motion for that.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Feathers, second by Mr. Kizner. Any questions or comments?
Mr. Mark, just to make sure I understood what you said, it references as per West Virginia Code 4321.1 is the main new part. But you're saying that you're not under the impression that that was a new West Virginia legislation?
I believe there was some legislative change, but it was, I think it was in the manner in terms of like, it couldn't be punitive. For example, like, you can't hold a kid's diploma.
Which we've done historically, right? It's been my understanding is that the historical policy has been.
This is where we can't do those type of things.
Yeah.
That was prompted by, I know that Mrs. Durr worked in consultation with Dr. Brozier, and this is in line with the state legislation. So.
Have we been taking parents to court, to magistrate court over past that?
Just basically.
We have continued to collect. I'll tell you where I know Mrs. Durr has to continue to do collections. We had a number of schools before we went to fully free lunch.
Right.
It was when they weren't free lunch, they incurred bills, and then after you go free, it becomes much more difficult to collect at that point, because they're like, no, we're free now, like, they don't. But we do still continue to get payments, and Mrs. Durr does continue to pursue that. I can't say that we see a landslide of funding coming in, but she does continue to bill, and we do get, certain interval money coming in.
Yeah, I'd say this is only 5-10 years
We have
away.
to continue to make a good faith effort to collect.
But we do, I just was seeing, because it did say something about we have to do all possible resources, then we are to take them back. I was just saying, our policy is that we do pursue the steps that we're required to as far as, okay, thank you.
Okay. So I need a motion or? Oh, I did, so that was a question, now call for the vote. It's me.
Burns up. Motion passes 5-0. And board, I'll have that returned to the 9th agenda for final approval.
Okay, next entertain a motion for the board to approve the attached educational leave request. And there are 9. Bless you.
Thank you. Make that motion.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Ziegler, second by Ms. Feathers. Any questions or comments?
You said currently, when I asked about this, like my first or second, there's no other follow-up after this. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm struggling with some of these. I mainly struggle, and it's me, and I apologize. But it is me looking at it and seeing educational leave, and then seeing what's written. But it used to be when I was a kid, like you had to write a report. All of that is gone now. Is that correct?
No, schools still have the ability to acquire it.
So it's on a school principal policy basis, is what that is on. Yes.
And also teachers.
Teachers have that ability.
Well, yeah, it's like the kids went on something Mr. Ziegler could affect science. He would have the kids talk about it. With history, I did the same thing.
Okay. I gotta keep one Iceland thing. And I said, if you come up in front of the room and talk about Iceland, I will do something.
Okay.
Because I think we were talking about earthquakes. I said, Iceland, oh my goodness, I want to go.
Okay. But that's promising to hear. I mean, I just,
yeah. I mean, I think there's
the one of them, I'm just hoping the parents learn the difference between a country and a county.
Right.
Okay, entertain the motion to approve.
You got the motion. I got the motion.
Motion, okay, now call for the vote. Thank you, Mr. You're welcome. That's sidetracked.
Burns up. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, moving on. At this time, entertain the motion for the board to approve the MOU between West Virginia Department of Education and Preston County Schools in response to the comprehensive support and improvement additional targeted support, abbreviated CSI-ATS, at designated schools.
And Mr. Huggins, I would say this was the list, the state published list at the beginning of the year for schools in certain improvement status in relation. It was most often in the special needs subgroup. West Preston has underperformed the last 3 years. That is why they have been designated for this comprehensive support and improvement status. We have Brewston that was in a kind of a different phase of this. This was year 1 for Brewston. But this is a more pronounced process. Now, there is funding that is tied to this as well. What this memorandum of understanding is again, that we will meet certain commitments in terms of our commitments in working with the State Department, and the State Department will indicate in terms of what they will do to provide support to the school in an effort to ultimately drive improvement in the special needs subgroup at West Preston.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Mr. Kisner, seconded by Mr. Ziegler. Any questions or comments?
Are the steps in this plan, Mr. Martin, are the steps proposed by us or proposed by the state?
Primarily, it's working in the consultation. I've only been in on one of the initial meetings. Right now, Mrs. Miller and Mrs. McDonald at West Preston are our points of contact on that. I can really probably get more pronounced information from them because I have not in the last. They've had a couple of online web-based meetings thus far. I believe they have already designated the level of funding for this. It's a substantial funding source that will be multiple years in. And that can be anything from providing needed materials, professional development, and an effort again to try to drive improvement for special needs students at the school.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions? Call for the vote.
Voting's open. Now what? Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, the next thing is just information that was given to us from last board meeting by Mr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. Huggins, I will say right now, in regards to the motion from the last meeting, there has been a response supplied to 1A, item 1A, item 2, item 4, and item 5. I will continue to work to provide the requested information, the remaining information, primarily from item number 1 and item number 3. I've also tried to include a series of action steps. First and foremost, we're trying to identify any classroom setting where there is not an available text. So, for example, Mr. Tatum, I know you brought up, for example, in science, but we have 2 district science teachers in the middle school adoption that took at that point in time, took the option for classroom supplies. I've asked Mrs. Layton to obtain quoting, to obtain the needed textbook resources for those classrooms. So it's our intent to look at those situations to be sure that we have the adopted textbook as per the state policy in classroom settings where that's not occurring. The other thing from an action standpoint is that our last principals meeting is to discuss, with our building administration and the fact that what we can't have are situations. I don't think the intent of anyone here is to mandate that we got to use the prescribed textbook and that's the only thing you use. I don't think that's the intent of anyone here. It is more so though that we cannot absolutely forego an adopted instructional resource. So the building principals now, through their observation processes, through their lesson plan reviews, are to assess that the classroom teacher is using, and that's the one thing I would say, I don't know that it doesn't necessarily spell out in policy the frequency of use, but it's that they're using that resource with some regularity, and they're ensuring that their students and parents know, for example, if it's an online textbook resource, how they are to log in. I mean, that information needs to be available to students and parents as per some of the concerns that were brought forth to the board. So I've tried to include some action steps that we're working towards, and I'll continue to work together the requested information as requested by the board back in November.
First of all, I'll just say I really appreciate the information and what you've found with it. And to reiterate that it's definitely not my intent that we mandate that a certain resource be used. And just what I quickly looked through the material, I think the West Virginia Department of Education policy sums it up best, which is basically saying that a supplemental resource cannot, as long you can use as many supplementals as you want, as long as it does not displace the adopted in the instructional resource. So I know from my personal family situation, when there was no primary source provided, because they were only using secondary, then it's obvious that the secondary has displaced the primary.
Correct. So at this point is, there needs to be direct references to, for example, if I'm working on a mathematical concept, I can very easily say I'm working on integers, to find additional examples of what we're working on today. In your primary textbook, you can find that on pages whatever. So again, it's referencing the student and the parent to material that's going to, again, assist them with the needed work. I think what we've had occur was instances where classroom teachers were just unilateral, I won't say unilateral, but we had some that were just absolutely foregoing the adopted material. So it's certainly our goal to, again, get teachers using those resources with some regularity and to be sure that if there are instances where there are textbook materials or whatever the adopted material is, to be sure that those materials are available in those classrooms.
Then I have a second. Thank you. The second comment was regarding iReady. I agree that from what I read in here that iReady does not need to be approved and adopted by the board from a curriculum resource standpoint, because in that regards it's a secondary resource. But from an assessment standpoint, I believe it does need to be adopted.
Well, I think that's
that would be based on curriculum.
Yeah, and I think that's, really, I think one thing we should look at that is when we move to the mathematics adoption, I think we need to address, depending upon what our committee, what the textbook committee comes up with, I think that would go a long ways towards, making a decision as to what's an appropriate assessment tool moving forward. And again, we'll work with that through the proper channels in terms of working with the textbook adoption team. Of course, we're going to be looking from a curriculum standpoint, we'll be hiring a director, so I think that individual working in conjunction with school administrations, teachers, I think there's a lot of decisions that need to be made over the next week.
I was just clarifying that. It's outside of this motion, because this motion is with curriculum resources. But as iReady is used as an assessment resource, according to the school curriculum team policy, then that requires assessments to be adopted by the board.
But it's not the only assessment.
Well,
I'm just thinking, for example, I think the general sum of assessment, the interim assessments, for example, used, which, in some tokens, the interim assessment is maybe an underutilized resource because it has a direct correlation. It's a direct correlation to the general sum. So, that's things. What we have to get into is we can't over-test it. There comes a point of saturation where they test it too much.
I was just pointing out as an assessment. In here it says it doesn't need to be, and I agree with that as a curriculum resource. As we saw with Ready Math, that's being used as a supplement right now because currently there was something else approved as the primary. But as an assessment, I still feel it needs to be approved, but that's outside of the motion.
Yeah, and I would say this, Mr. Payton, I think we can address that. Currently, unfortunately, we're under contractual terms, so we'd be throwing good money at bad to make that. I think we need to make that decision as our contracts come up.
Yeah, I agree with that. I was just pointing that out.
If I can just piggyback, the notes that I made when I looked through this on the CNI number 4 resource was just that iReady is listed as not our primary curriculum, but I will say I don't know that tonight, but multiple other schools that we have visited have brought up iReady, and not brought up anything else. And I know that multiple schools, I know even my school right now, almost every grade I see something with these iReady competitions. I point that out only to say, just because we call something our primary, to your point earlier, if the other thing, I think we'd be hard pressed to defend as a system right now that iReady is not a primary resource, in the way at least it's being pushed. Now, it may not be written someplace that it's our primary, but it's the predominant word, it's the predominant title, I literally, I had asked someone, why do we have special incentive money for iReady? And they said, well, we don't, but that's something that we see about you, and that's fine, but I'm just saying, it's being used a lot. I'm not saying it shouldn't be the primary, but I think we'd be hard pressed to defend that it's not a primary the way that at least I hear it being thrown out constantly. So anyways, that would be the only thing is that was literally what my question was.
As our assessment and benchmarking, I would agree. And like you said, I do think many teachers have chosen to use some of the resources, which I think kind of led to, for example, this group that requested to be a part of the pilot process because they were using some of the resources. I wouldn't argue that point either, Mr. Kisner.
Yeah, I would just say, I don't want to be in trouble with the state with, I mean, again, I think if somebody were to observe our things, and I understand the state's probably
The
not.
impression I read from the state is honestly, it's a
Yeah.
local matter. I mean,
I
I
read that
said, I'm on, but they were very emphatic it's a local matter. I mean,
They were emphatic.
didn't want to be a part of
The latest legislation, we're not really watching.
Yeah.
I'll say what they said. I was what that. Right. Okay. But the last question I have while we're on this subject, if I may, it referenced that in 2021 there was a strategic plan that is referenced. Is there a resource better than the meeting minutes from that meeting that we have access to, or that I can get access to look at that strategic?
Oh, no, I get that.
Okay.
That's no problem. Yeah, I get that.
Well, again, I'm trying not to make you work, but if that's something that I should be able to find on the Preston County website, but I do think that we should probably be familiar with that. Just something I'd like
Well,
to.
and that's a fair point too, with it, that we do need to be familiar. Because some of the things we talked about tonight, that's why I asked Mr. Marshall, to make sure it tied directly in with the county. Because he has to have to match up.
And I apologize if it's something I should have already had or found or done. I just, when I read that in the thing, and I said, well, this is something I should, I mean, Ms. Feathers has referenced that in the past. This is not the first reference to it, but.
Yeah, we actually, at that point in time too, Mrs. Dreisbach was actually the board's representative that did that process. She actually sat on the committee that developed the strategic plan at the time. No, that's not a problem at all to get that access.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else? Okay, moving on.
We've already done that. But
Yep, move down to finance at this time. Entertain a motion for the board to approve the budget journal entries 137 through 139 and 202.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, second by Mrs. Feathers. Any questions or comments?
I'm assuming that the last one in there, Mr. Martin, for almost $80,000, is that the door project? It's to a contractor.
Was it 82,000?
It's 79,438, but it says ESERF indirect cost revenue to a project. And the door program was the only thing I could think of, but I just was curious. It'll be on the very last page of the budget.
No, 80, you're saying 84,000?
No, 79.
Oh,
It came out of contingency and went to contractors.
I believe that's what, I'll tell you what, I can get clarification for that. I believe that's probably for exterior doors. Then when you start asking, I thought the 80, that was for, we actually filed for an emergency connectivity fund. The 84,000, the amount of money we were reimbursed for the laptops we purchased last year.
Yeah. I think that's over this.
We need clarification on the 79,438.
Yeah, I just was.
I can check that out.
The fact that it came out of contingency and went to contractors, I assumed that it was the door fund, because that's what I could see was the activity going on in other areas, but I just was asking it.
I'll clarify.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Tatum, did you start to ask a question on that one?
No, I was trying to explain to Colin.
Okay, nothing else? Call for the vote? That's why I was asking.
Vote is open. Motion passes 5-0.
Next is scheduled checks. After we do the motion, we'll have to do a voice vote. At this time, I entertain a motion to approve the schedules of checks.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Kisner, seconded by Mr. Zegrate. Any questions or comments? Okay, hearing none, call for the vote. The voice vote. Okay, Mr. Kisner.
Yes.
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 5-0. And I'll update that in a minute. Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir. Okay, next is an informational maintenance work orders.
Yeah, that's just November and December work orders.
You know, one of the things, just as a question, and I know we're looking at cuts, Mr. Bigger and I, around the maintenance guys, it's hard for them to keep up with the ones we our custodians. I mean, it's really concerning to me cutting, and I know I know you don't have choices, I get it, but I'm just looking at how we're going to keep up.
Well, I can tell you, like, some projects, Mr. Huggins, like, for example, we have an upcoming project where we're doing the doors, like the door system where we can secure the interior of the door. And we are going to have the vendor do some of the installation on that because we just buried our maintenance department. I mean, the maintenance department had hundreds of doors. Yeah. That's all they work on. Now, what I would like them to do is when we have an installation crew here, I want a couple of our maintenance guys kind of shadowing those groups because they're going to do about 5 of our schools, some of our larger buildings. But then really, as they shadow them, we can internally do the work at the remaining buildings pretty efficiently. I think we can get those. We tried to bite off where we thought it was going to take an exorbitant amount of time because, I mean, one goal I've had for Mr. Benninger this year is I want, like, every classroom we need to be able to secure from the interior rapidly. So that's something by year's end, I want to make sure all of our schools are on that front. But if I dumped all that on our maintenance department, they couldn't keep up with it. There's no way.
Well, I look at the number of buildings, you know, I just called, I'm trying to come to the late meeting, something to think about. Anything for the next agenda?
Sort of maintenance, I don't know that it needs to be an agenda item, but I know that our new security guy went around and took all the door stops that were being used to hold all these main outside doors, and I understand from the security's perspective why we did that. But, for instance, what's happening at Terra East Preston, and this is not against anybody, this is what's happening when there's nobody, when there's administration not even there. So this is not a thing on administration, but floor mats are being used to hold doors open. We're causing unnecessary wear and tear in order to try to hold doors open. We don't, at Terra, you can't open up both sets of doors without a key to one, and we don't give the keys to people that are using the building. So they get in, they get to a side door, and then they open it up. So there's got to be a middle ground solution here.
Well, he never took the stops away for the outside doors. What has to be done is, and we used to stop here for the outside door and at Fellows,ville, but those doors are constantly manned while those doors are open. So you'll never walk up and see a door propped open and nobody there.
And again, I understand the security perspective, but I also know that people are going to find a way, whether it's putting a chair in and letting more air in than should be, instead of just having a 1-inch gap in the winter. I don't know where it needs addressed at, but there's got to be a better solution. Again, the way the formats are being used, and again, there's nobody there at the building to police that, but that's what people are doing to find a way around it.
They're going to use doors or whatever, or chairs, and they'll prop it.
We're just going to destroy property. I don't know. A key or a way that the door can be locked open if there's a way, something that can be done. But again, I understand why we don't want something permanent there. We got to find a common sense something.
That's why right now they probably have
I understand what
fire marshal comes right to
There's a thing in the maintenance work right now for a fire marshal saying we had to put extra handles on some doors, but I'm sure those doors have been there for the past 20 years. Fire marshals will find things, and we will accommodate what we have to keep it. I just don't, there's no reason to destroy stuff because of, people are still finding a way. We just removed the simple solution, and I just don't,
Anything else for the agenda? Okay, just as a quick reminder, then the next time.
Yeah, my question is, Mr. Huggins, if we have the legislative meeting, do I need to declare that as a special meeting? Can we, I'm not sure how we need to proceed with that. If it's work session, we have a problem.
It'll have to be a special meeting.
Okay. We'll constitute the work.
There's
no other items on there.
There's no decision to be made. We should just be able to cover it under a work session, I would think.
Okay. Because there's not like
That's correct. We will publicize that to our staff, to the general public, and that will be again Wednesdays the 4th at 5:30 p.m.
And I would say probably, that's what I think, if staff has questions, they need to send those in writing so that they can be asked to them ahead of time, so we don't get in there. You want me to, that might be a little easier from the legislators. They're kind of up to come, so they don't blindside.
Our work sessions are now recorded and available for public view. I don't know if that will be a problem with our legislators. I don't know if we need to ask about I don't want to discourage them if there's, I would think that that would be fine, but I don't want anybody to be discouraged by that. Well, that's, I assume they're more used to it.
Anything else from the agenda? Okay, hearing nothing. Next meeting at this point is January 4th. That'll be a work session at 5:30. January 9th, which is a Monday, and Mr. Martin will make arrangements for you two people to get out of class at 10 o'clock. Okay, and with that, I would say Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Tatum, second by Mrs. Bowers. Any questions or comments or discussion? Hearing none, call for the vote.